Chapter 681. Akashic Records. 3. I materialized back in the ruined house, space folding around me like a closing book as the gray deposited me exactly where I'd left my family. The stones bore scorch marks from Cardinal Akasha's assault, and debris littered the floor where walls had been torn apart by vampiric fury. But Luna and Reika were safe. My daughter sat huddled against Reika's side, her small form trembling as she clutched the purple butterfly toy I'd given her. When she saw me appear, her dark eyes lit up with relief so profound it made my chest tighten. "Daddy!" Luna scrambled to her feet and ran toward me, her arms outstretched. I knelt down to catch her, a smile spreading across my face as the last of my protective fury dissolved into pure paternal love. The gray power still hummed beneath my skin like liquid starlight, but seeing Luna safe and unharmed made everything else fade into insignificance. "I'm here, sweetheart," I murmured as she crashed into my arms. "Everything's going to be." The moment my hands touched her, the gray responded. I felt the power surge without my conscious direction, flowing from my being into Luna's small form like water finding its level. But instead of the gentle warmth I expected, the gray moved with purpose, reaching deep into Luna's cellular structure, her very essence, searching for something specific. "No," I whispered, trying to pull back, but the gray had already found its target, the artificial heavenly demon power woven into Luna's being and existence. For 8 years, that foreign essence had defined her existence, granting her impossible strength while simultaneously making her a prisoner of her own abilities. It was the source of her value to the Red Chalice cult, the reason she'd been created, the chain that bound her to a destiny of violence and suffering. The gray touched that demonic essence and began to unravel it. I watched in fascination and growing horror as wisps of dark energy started to seep from Luna's skin like smoke. The power that had made her capable of destroying mountains was being systematically erased, pulled apart at the fundamental level and scattered into nothingness. "Daddy!" Luna looked up at me with confusion, her voice smaller than usual. "I feel different, like something's leaving me." "It's okay," I said quickly, though I wasn't sure if that was true. "Just hold still, sweetheart. Let it happen." The process accelerated. Tendrils of midnight black energy poured from Luna's body in streams, each one carrying away another fragment of her artificial nature. Her enhanced strength, her supernatural resilience, her ability to manipulate deep dark and miasma. All of it flowing away like water through a sieve. Reika approached cautiously, her eyes wide with concern. "Arthur, what's happening to her?" "The gray it's removing her enhancements," I explained, struggling to understand it myself. "It's taking away everything they did to her." As the last of the demonic essence dissipated into empty air, Luna swayed on her feet. I caught her automatically, and was shocked by how light she felt. Not just physically, but spiritually. The oppressive weight of power that had always surrounded her was completely gone. "Luna, how do you feel?" She blinked slowly, looking around the ruined sanctuary as if seeing it for the first time. "I feel normal," she said with wonder. "Like the heavy feeling in my chest is gone. Like I can breathe properly." My heart soared. The gray had done the impossible. It had freed Luna from her artificial nature without harming her. She was no longer a weapon, no longer a tool to be used by others. She was just a little girl, exactly as she should have been. But even as relief flooded through me, I felt something else beginning to slip away. The gray power that had made me temporarily omnipotent was starting to fade. It began as a subtle loosening, like trying to hold water in cupped hands. The vast cosmic awareness that had let me perceive the fundamental structure of reality started to narrow, becoming more focused, more limited. The ability to edit existence itself grew sluggish, requiring more effort to achieve smaller effects. "No," I breathed, trying to grasp the retreating power. "Not yet." But the gray continued to flow away from me like sand through my fingers. Each second brought diminishing returns. Where I had once been able to unmake entire armies with a thought, now I could barely maintain the basic enhancement to my perception. "Arthur." Luna's mental voice sounded distant, strained. "Something's wrong. I can feel you fading." I looked down at my hands and saw them beginning to tremble. The cosmic understanding that had seemed so natural moments before was becoming alien again, slipping back into the realm of incomprehensible theory rather than lived experience. "Daddy." Luna's voice seemed to come from very far away, though she was still in my arms. "Your eyes are changing back." I caught my reflection in a piece of broken glass and saw that she was right. The impossible gray that had replaced my natural azure was fading, bleeding away like watercolor in rain. Soon only my original eye color remained. The world around me began to blur at the edges as exhaustion crashed over me in waves. "Arthur." Reika's voice carried urgent concern as she watched me sway on my feet. "Stay with us." But I was already falling into darkness, my consciousness scattering like leaves in an autumn wind. The last of the gray power slipped through my mental fingers despite my desperate attempts to hold onto it. I simply couldn't comprehend it yet. As my vision darkened, I caught a glimpse of familiar golden hair hovering at the edge of my perception. The world dissolved around me, replaced by an endless gray void that felt familiar yet alien. I found myself standing in a space between spaces, surrounded by the echoing remnants of cosmic understanding I could no longer fully grasp. It was then that I heard the voice. Not yet. A divine whisper drifted through the void like gentle starlight given sound. The voice was feminine, ancient beyond measure, carrying the weight of all knowledge that had ever existed. I spun around, searching for the source of the voice, but found only empty grayness stretching in all directions. Did you really think it would be so easy? The voice continued, and I recognized it now. God Akasha, keeper of the Akashic records, guardian of all knowledge and memory, that you could simply claim power beyond mortal comprehension and face no consequences? I need that power, I whispered, though my voice carried no sound in this strange space, to protect Luna, to keep her safe. The gray is not meant for mortal minds. Akasha's voice resonated with infinite patience. It is the force that exists between existence and void, between knowledge and ignorance. You touched it briefly, yes, but extended contact would have unmade your very soul. I felt the last traces of gray power slip away completely, leaving me drained and vulnerable in the space between realities. Whatever temporary omnipotence I'd achieved was gone, replaced by crushing ordinary mortality. But you have learned, the goddess continued, her tone carrying notes of approval. You chose love over power when it mattered most. You saved your daughter by giving up what you thought you needed. She's free now, I said, remembering Luna's transformation. The artificial power is gone. Yes, and that act of selfless love has opened pathways that were previously closed to you. I could sense Akasha's presence moving closer, though I still couldn't see her. You are not ready for the gray, child. But when the time comes, when you have grown into who you need to be, the path will be open. The void began to collapse around me, pulling me back toward consciousness and the physical world. But even as I fell back toward wakefulness, Akasha's final words followed me like a promise. Sleep now, recover your strength. Your daughter needs her father, not a god drunk on cosmic power. But remember, love opened this door once, can open it again. My eyes snapped open in the monastery's ruined sanctuary, gasping as full consciousness returned. Luna was still in my arms, looking perfectly normal. No supernatural aura, no enhanced abilities, just a little girl with dark hair and worried eyes. I succeeded. Chapter 682. Gray 1. Queen Isolde Creighton sat in perfect stillness at her marble tea table, the delicate porcelain cup balanced between fingers that had signed death warrants and peace treaties with equal composure. Her sapphire eyes reflected the afternoon light as she took measured sips of her tea, each movement calculated with the precision of someone who had learned that every gesture carried weight. The grace and poise of absolute authority emanated from her being like an invisible crown, marking her as one who had never known defeat. Until today, her eyes began to change. The natural sapphire blue dissolved as brilliant geometric patterns emerged across her irises. Interlocking circles, spiraling fractals, mathematical equations that described the fundamental structure of reality itself. The transformation was beautiful and terrible, marking the activation of a gift that existed beyond mortal comprehension. Akasha's eyes. A direct connection to the Akashic records themselves, the cosmic library that contained all knowledge, all possibilities, all futures that had ever been or could ever be. Isolde focused her enhanced perception, reaching across dimensional boundaries to access the infinite storehouse of knowledge that was her birthright. The familiar sensation of omniscience began to flow through her consciousness. Past, present, and future unfolding like pages in an endless book. She turned her attention toward a specific thread of fate, following the intricate pattern she had spent decades weaving. Arthur Nightingale, the reincarnated soul. Her eyes should have shown her his current status, his emotional state, his next probable actions across 1,000 possible timelines. Instead, she saw nothing. Where Arthur Nightingale should have been, there existed only an incomprehensible void, not darkness, but the complete absence of information itself. Her gift, which had never failed her in decades of use, simply stopped working. The teacup slipped from her nerveless fingers. Clang. Porcelain shattered against marble in a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the perfect silence of her chambers. Tea spread across the floor like spilled blood, but Isolde gave it no attention. Her entire focus was consumed by the impossible sight before her, or rather, the impossible lack of sight. She rose from her chair with mechanical precision, her movements losing their characteristic fluid grace as panic began to claw at the edges of her composure. The geometric patterns in her eyes swirled faster, becoming more complex as she poured additional mana into her gift. She had to see. She had to know. The strain hit her immediately. Her enhanced perception, designed to process infinite information, recoiled from whatever force was protecting Arthur from observation. It was like trying to stare directly into the sun. Not just painful but fundamentally wrong, as if her consciousness was attempting to comprehend something that existed outside the concept of comprehension itself. Drip. Blood began to trickle from her nose as her brain struggled to process the impossible. Still, she pushed harder, desperation overriding caution as she forced more power through the connection. The geometric patterns in her eyes blazed with increasing intensity, becoming so complex they seemed to move into dimensions that shouldn't exist. For the second time in her life, Isolde's gift was failing her. She couldn't see Arthur Nightingale. Just as she prepared to increase the intensity even further, consequences be damned. A voice of infinite gentleness reached through the screaming pain in her skull. Relax, child. The words carried the weight of stars and the warmth of a mother's embrace, flowing through the connection between the Akashic records and Isolde's consciousness. Immediately, the crushing pressure eased, though the void where Arthur should be remained stubbornly impenetrable. Akasha? Isolde whispered, her arms trembling as she wrapped them around herself. The composed queen was gone, replaced by a frightened woman whose entire worldview was crumbling. What is it? Why isn't it working? Why is the plan deviating from the pattern? In the space between thoughts, in the realm where all knowledge resided, Goddess Akasha manifested her attention like a warm presence settling over Isolde's consciousness. The ancient being who served as librarian of all existence regarded her chosen instrument with something approaching maternal affection. Child, Akasha asked with infinite patience, why do you assume this is a tragedy? Isolde's eyes widened in disbelief. Tragedy? How could it not be? We planned everything so carefully, orchestrated every variable. And now it's all being ruined. Arthur was supposed to follow the pattern, supposed to grow strong enough to face what's coming. That, Akasha said, and Isolde could hear the smile in the goddess's voice, is precisely why this is wonderful news. The response was so unexpected that Isolde's legs gave out, sending her stumbling back into her chair. In the Akashic records, she sensed Akasha's form shifting as the goddess's attention focused fully on their conversation. Akasha's consciousness expanded, her perception encompassing not just the immediate moment but the vast tapestry of existence itself. Her awareness touched the edges of something magnificent and terrible, a power that existed beyond even her cosmic understanding. He is the second being to surpass it, Akasha whispered, her voice carrying overtones of awe that sent shivers down Isolde's spine. Isolde felt her breath catch. Seconds since. She couldn't finish the sentence, but both beings knew who had been the first. You have suffered so much, my dear child, Akasha continued, her presence settling around Isolde like a comforting embrace. Despite being a grown woman with a daughter in her 20s, in Akasha's presence Isolde felt like the excited young girl who had first accessed the records after unlocking her gift. Every sacrifice you've made, every manipulation you've orchestrated, every moment of pain you've endured while guiding events from the shadows, it will all be worth it. Worth it. Isolde's voice cracked with decades of suppressed emotion. We've failed so many times. At this rate, by the time the real threat arrives. She stopped speaking as she witnessed something impossible. In the space between thoughts, in the realm where all knowledge resided, Akasha was smiling. Not the sad, knowing expression Isolde had grown accustomed to over the years, but genuine joy. For the first time in millennia, the goddess of knowledge looked hopeful. This universe is vast beyond all comprehension, Akasha said, her words carrying the weight of eons. Even I, born to be its eternal librarian, must acknowledge that what I know represents merely a drop in an infinite ocean of possibility. The Akashic records contain all knowledge that exists within the boundaries of reality itself. She paused, and Isolde felt the magnitude of what was coming. But Arthur Nightingale has touched something that exists beyond those boundaries. For only the second time in all of existence, I have encountered a being that the records themselves cannot catalog or predict. A soul that has transcended the very concept of fate. Isolde stared out her window at the city she ruled, her mind reeling from the implications. If Arthur truly existed outside the reach of prophecy and prediction, then everything she had planned, everything she had sacrificed to achieve. The plan is not ruined, child, Akasha said gently, reading her thoughts. The plan has evolved beyond our ability to control it. And that, my dear Isolde, is exactly what we needed. For the first time in years, Queen Isolde Creighton allowed herself to hope. Perhaps they finally had a chance. Chapter 683, Grey, 2. How utterly infuriating. I thought as I gazed down at the unconscious face resting in my lap. Arthur Nightingale, the man who had vanished for over a week on some mysterious guild mission, completely unreachable despite my increasingly frantic attempts to contact him. And when he finally reappeared, it was with Reika in tow and an 8-year-old girl named Luna, who had immediately proclaimed herself his daughter with the kind of absolute certainty that only children possessed. I'd briefly wondered if they had somehow managed to produce a child during their week-long absence, but even Arthur wasn't capable of such biological impossibilities. An 8-year-old girl required considerably more time to develop, after all. Regardless, my questions would have to remain unanswered since Arthur was currently unconscious. Again, can this man win a single fight without collapsing afterward? I wondered with exasperation, my fingers unconsciously tracing the sharp line of his jaw. The familiar gesture had become almost automatic whenever I found him in this state, which was disturbingly often. As my fingertips accidentally brushed against his lips, my breath hitched slightly. Heat flooded my cheeks as I realized what I was doing, and I quickly pulled my hand back as if burned. What the hell is wrong with me? I chastised myself silently. I am the crown princess of the Slatemark Empire. I command armies and shape the fate of nations. I am not some lovesick schoolgirl who gets flustered by touching her boyfriend's face. But even as I told myself that, I couldn't forget the crushing despair that had nearly destroyed me when I thought Arthur had betrayed us by joining the Red Chalice cult. The memory of that moment still made my chest tighten with phantom pain, the absolute certainty that my world was ending, that the most important person in my life had become my enemy. I had been ready to end it all rather than face a future where Arthur and I stood on opposite sides of a battlefield. I'm pathetically weak when it comes to him, I admitted reluctantly. The failed raid, the loss of face before the Imperial Court, the strategic implications of our botched mission. None of that had mattered in the face of potentially losing Arthur. My pride, my reputation, my duty as crown princess. All of it had paled beside the terror of imagining a world without him in it. And now here he was, sleeping peacefully in my lap with that annoyingly perfect face that drew admirers like flowers drew bees. Arthur wasn't conventionally the most handsome man in the Empire. There were nobles with more classical features, court dandies who spent fortunes on enhancement surgery. But there was something about him that made people stop and stare. Something that made far too many women flutter their eyelashes and find excuses to speak with him. Too many flies buzzing around what's mine. I thought with a surge of possessive irritation. The Imperial physicians had examined Arthur thoroughly after we'd brought him to the palace. Their diagnosis was reassuringly mundane. Magical exhaustion leading to temporary unconsciousness. His brain had simply overloaded from whatever technique he'd used during the battle, and now he was recovering through natural sleep. They assured me he could wake at any moment. Which was exactly why I had stationed myself here with his head in my lap, claiming this position like a territorial cat. Mine and only mine. I let my perception extend slightly, analyzing the mana patterns flowing through Arthur's sleeping form. The readings made my eyes widen in surprise. He was definitely high ascendant rank now, a significant jump from the mid-ascendant strength he'd possessed before the mission. What exactly happened? I wondered. The reports from my strike team were fragmented at best. Something about impossible magical phenomena, reality warping effects, and enemies that simply ceased to exist. None of it made sense, but the evidence was undeniable. Arthur had faced down forces that should have been far beyond his capabilities and emerged victorious, even if unconscious. He was growing stronger at an alarming rate. Stronger, smarter, more capable with each passing month. And despite my possessive nature, I couldn't help but feel a fierce pride in his accomplishments. My brilliant, powerful, infuriating man. A soft whimper from across the room drew my attention to where Luna was curled up in a chair, still sleeping after her earlier emotional breakdown. The poor child had cried herself into exhaustion when she thought Arthur might not wake up, clinging to his hand and calling him Daddy with desperate intensity. I wasn't heartless enough to be jealous of an 8-year-old girl's attachment to her father figure. The bond between them was clearly genuine, and seeing Arthur's protective instincts toward the child had only made me love him more. But I was absolutely heartless enough to neglect informing Rose, Rachel, and Seraphina about Arthur's current condition. Let them wonder where he was for a while longer. This was my time with him, and I wasn't sharing. Arthur's breathing began to change subtly, becoming less deep and regular. His eyelashes fluttered against his cheeks as consciousness started to return, and I felt my heart rate accelerate in anticipation. Finally, I thought with relief, time to get some answers about what the hell happened out there. Arthur's azure eyes opened slowly, blinking in confusion as they focused on my face. For a moment, he looked completely disoriented, as if he couldn't quite remember where he was or how he'd gotten there. Cecilia? He said softly, his voice rough from sleep. How long was I? 3 days, I replied, trying to keep my tone casual despite the relief flooding through me. The doctors said you suffered magical exhaustion, but your vitals have been stable. Arthur started to sit up, but I placed a firm hand on his chest, keeping him in place. Don't even think about moving yet. You collapsed after using some kind of technique that apparently broke several laws of magic. You're staying right where you are until I'm satisfied you're not going to pass out again. A small smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. Worried about me? Obviously not. I lied with automatic reflexes. I just don't want to deal with the paperwork if you die on Imperial property. Do you have any idea how much bureaucratic nonsense is involved when someone of your status expires in the palace? Arthur's smile widened, clearly seeing through my deflection. Of course, purely practical concerns. Exactly, I said firmly, though my fingers were already checking his pulse and temperature with obvious worry. Now explain to me what happened in that monastery. My strike team's reports sound like fantasy novels. Arthur's expression grew serious as memory returned. Luna, he said suddenly, looking around the room until he spotted the sleeping child. Is she? She's fine, I assured him quickly. Changed, somehow. The physicians say she has no traces of supernatural enhancement left in her system, but perfectly healthy. She's been sleeping in that chair for the past 6 hours, refusing to leave your side. Relief flooded Arthur's features. The gray worked then. It removed the artificial power without harming her. The gray, I prompted, my curiosity sharpening. Arthur, what exactly did you do out there? He was quiet for a moment, his azure eyes distant as he processed recent events. Something I probably shouldn't have been able to survive, he said finally. I used a technique that gave me temporary access to forces beyond normal reality. It was overwhelming. And now I'm back to being merely human, Arthur said with a rueful laugh. Well, mostly human. High ascendant rank human, apparently. Speaking of which, Arthur said, fixing me with a questioning look. How much trouble am I in for disappearing without authorization? I imagine the Imperial Court isn't pleased about the failed raid. I waved dismissively. Nothing that can't be managed. I told them you were conducting deep cover intelligence gathering that required complete communication blackout. Technically true, since you did infiltrate their organization. And the fact that we came back with a mysterious child? Rescued asset from cult experimentation, I replied smoothly. Also technically true. The court loves stories about heroic rescue missions. Arthur's expression softened as he looked at me. You covered for me. I covered for us? I corrected, feeling heat rise in my cheeks again. We're partners, Arthur. When you succeed, I succeed. When you're in danger. I trailed off, not wanting to admit how terrified I'd been during his absence. When I'm in danger? Arthur prompted gently. When you're in danger, I worry, I said reluctantly. A little, barely noticeable amounts of concern. Arthur reached up to cup my face with his hand, his thumb brushing across my cheek in a gesture that made my heart skip. I missed you too, Cecilia. I didn't say I missed you, I protested weakly, even as I leaned into his touch. I said I was worried about the paperwork. Of course, Arthur agreed solemnly. The paperwork must be truly terrifying. Before I could formulate a properly scathing response, a small voice interrupted from across the room. Daddy? You're awake. Luna had stirred from her nap and was now staring at us with wide, hopeful eyes. The moment she confirmed Arthur was conscious, she scrambled out of her chair and ran over to us. Daddy, I was so scared, she said, throwing her arms around Arthur's neck in an enthusiastic hug. You wouldn't wake up and Cecilia said you were just sleeping but you looked so pale and… I'm okay, sweetheart, Arthur assured her, returning the hug with obvious affection. Just tired from using too much magic. But I'm fine now. Luna pulled back to study his face carefully. Promise. I promise. As I watched the interaction between Arthur and his adopted daughter, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Affection for both of them, protective instincts toward Luna, and a growing certainty that our little family was about to face challenges that would test all of our bonds. But for now, Arthur was safe, Luna was free, and we were together. It would have to be enough. Chapter 686. Daughter 1. At this point, we should make this a tradition, Rachel suggested with that particular smile of hers. The same one she'd worn when showing me a cage on her phone months ago, which was to say she wasn't really smiling at all. Currently, I found myself in one of the Imperial Palace's more intimate living rooms, surrounded by Rachel, Serafina, Rose, Cecilia, and Reika. Luna sat contentedly on my lap, humming a soft melody as she played with a small puzzle Cecilia had given her. We absolutely should, Serafina agreed, her voice maintaining its usual cool composure despite the slight edge of exasperation. Your pattern of reckless behavior has become remarkably predictable. We always end up gathering like this whenever he gets unconscious or disappears, Rose added, her tone carrying that deceptively casual note that meant trouble. I suspect even when he reaches Radiant rank, this particular habit won't change. Cecilia snorted with unladylike amusement. That's because he's an idiot who thinks he can handle everything alone. I turned hopefully toward Reika, the only one who hadn't contributed to my verbal execution. When her violet eyes met mine, she immediately looked down at her hands with obvious guilt. Traitor, I thought despairingly. You did kind of deserve that one. Luna's voice chimed in my mind with obvious amusement. Disappearing for a week without telling anyone? Even I could have predicted this reaction. So, Rachel continued, her attention shifting to the little girl in my lap. We need to discuss Luna's situation. Luna looked up from her puzzle, blinking at the assembled women with curious innocence. What about me? Well, sweetheart. Rachel's voice softened considerably when addressing Luna directly. You're Arthur's daughter now, which means you're part of our family too. Our very large, complicated family, Rose added with a meaningful look around the room. Serafina observed Luna for a moment, her expression carefully neutral. The logical conclusion, she said with characteristic directness, is that Luna's welfare becomes a shared responsibility among all parties invested in Arthur's well-being. You're our daughter too, Cecilia finished more bluntly. All of ours. I blinked in surprise. Wait, hold on. No objections. Rachel cut me off smoothly. Luna is technically your first child, Arthur. She'll be your first child for quite some time, given our current circumstances. That makes her special to all of us. Strategically speaking, Serafina added, though there was the faintest softening around her eyes as Luna giggled at something in her puzzle. Ensuring Luna's optimal development serves everyone's interests. But, I said carefully, you do realize we're not even engaged yet? Any of us? This seems like getting ahead of ourselves. 5 pairs of eyes fixed on me with varying degrees of exasperation. He raises a valid point, Serafina conceded with clinical precision. Legally, we lack standing to claim parental authority. Technicalities, Cecilia waved dismissively, though I caught the slight blush on her cheeks. Fine, Rachel said with the air of someone making a strategic concession. We'll table the official mother discussion until after marriages happen. But that doesn't mean we can't spoil her in the meantime. Extensively spoil her, Rose clarified, already reaching out to gently touch Luna's hair. She's been through so much, and now she gets to just be a child. Serafina's facade cracked slightly as she watched Luna's animated expressions. She is rather small, she observed quietly, as if this was a purely factual assessment rather than an admission of finding Luna adorable. Luna looked around at all the attention with wide-eyed wonder. You all want to take care of me? Of course we do. Reika spoke up for the first time, her voice gentle. You're precious to Arthur, which makes you precious to us. Furthermore, Serafina added, her tone attempting to remain analytical even as her eyes lingered on Luna's butterfly toy. Your current status as an ordinary child requires proper guidance and protection. It would be inefficient to provide anything less than optimal care. I'm not adorable, Luna protested with 8-year-old dignity. I'm a very serious person. Serafina's carefully maintained composure shattered completely. The small sound she made was barely audible, but it was definitely the Kaderi equivalent of a squeal of delight. Ahem, she cleared her throat, desperately trying to regain her stoic demeanor. That is a very mature attitude, Luna. This declaration, delivered while Luna hugged her butterfly toy to her chest, had the opposite of its intended effect on everyone else. Oh my God, Cecilia breathed. She's even cuter when she tries to be serious. The cost-benefit analysis of keeping her is overwhelmingly positive, Serafina said with forced clinical detachment, though her voice was slightly higher than usual. I vote yes, Rachel said decisively. All in favor of keeping Luna forever? 5 hands shot up immediately, including Serafina's, which rose with mechanical precision despite the slight tremor in her fingers. Motion carried, Serafina announced, attempting to sound official while clearly fighting the urge to smile. Luna looked thoroughly confused by this exchange, but pleased by all the positive attention. Does this mean I get 5 mommies when Daddy gets married? The question hung in the air like a carefully placed explosive. All 5 women suddenly found various objects in the room fascinating to stare at, their faces ranging from pink to deep red. That's... Rachel cleared her throat delicately. That's a conversation for much later, sweetheart. When you're older, Cecilia added quickly. Much older, Rose emphasized. Significantly older from a developmental standpoint. Serafina contributed with forced academic precision, though her ears were noticeably red. Reika just nodded emphatically. I decided this was an excellent time to change the subject. So, Luna, what do you think of your new room? Cecilia had it specially prepared for you. Luna brightened immediately, thankfully distracted from the marriage implications. It's wonderful. There's a big window that shows the garden, and Cecilia got me books with pictures of all different kinds of butterflies. Educational materials are essential for proper cognitive development, Serafina said, her voice returning to its usual cool tone, though she was clearly pleased by Luna's enthusiasm. And there's going to be more, Cecilia added. We're having art supplies delivered tomorrow, and Rose mentioned something about educational games. I may have ordered a few things, Rose admitted with studied casualness. Just some basic learning materials, and possibly some toys, and maybe some clothes. The shopping list got a bit extensive. How extensive? I asked warily. She'll require additional storage space, Serafina observed with clinical detachment. The current room allocation may prove insufficient. Or possibly a separate wing of the palace, Rachel added with amusement. I groaned. You're all going to spoil her rotten. That's the optimal outcome, Serafina said with perfect seriousness, then seemed to realize what she'd admitted. I mean, ensuring adequate resources for child development is simply logical. Luna giggled at the display, and I realized that despite the chaos and complications my love life represented, she would never lack for affection or support. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would have a family that would protect and cherish her, even if that family was admittedly quite unconventional. You know, Luna's voice whispered in my mind. For someone who worries about being overwhelmed by romantic complications, you seem to have ended up with the perfect solution. How is this perfect? I thought back. This is incredibly complicated. But Luna will never doubt she's loved. And honestly, Arthur, when has your life ever been simple? She had a point there. Chapter 687. Daughter, 2. The elevator rose smoothly toward the top floor of the luxury apartment complex, its polished interior reflecting Luna's nervous expression as she gripped my hand tightly. The penthouse had been my family's home for as long as I could remember. A spacious dwelling that offered both privacy and the kind of security that came with living among the capital's elite. Daddy? Luna whispered, her voice carrying a nervous tremor. What if they don't like me? I squeezed her hand gently. They'll love you, sweetheart. Just be yourself. The elevator chimed softly as we reached our floor, and I used my key to access the penthouse. The familiar entryway opened before us, revealing my mother's worried face almost immediately. Alice Nightingale was a striking woman in her mid-40s, her black hair falling in waves past her shoulders and her azure eyes, identical to my own, carrying the sharp intelligence that made her invaluable to my father's guild operations. Arthur, she exclaimed, relief flooding her features as she took in my appearance. Thank the gods you're safe. Douglas has been pacing holes in the floor ever since we got word you disappeared, and the girls have been calling non-stop asking if we'd heard anything. Her words died as her gaze fell to Luna. Who is this? Mother, I said carefully. I'd like you to meet Luna. Luna. This is my mother, Alice. Luna performed a small, perfect curtsy that Cecilia had obviously taught her. It's nice to meet you, grandmother, she said with 8-year-old solemnity. The silence that followed could have been cut with a blade. Grandmother, Alice repeated faintly, her azure eyes moving between Luna and me with visible confusion. Heavy footsteps announced my father's arrival from his home office. Douglas Nightingale commanded attention without trying, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver-streaked black hair and the weathered hands of someone who'd built his guild from nothing. His expression shifted from relief at seeing me to bewilderment as he processed the scene. Arthur, who? He began, then stopped as Luna looked up at him with those dark eyes full of nervous hope. Father, this is Luna, my daughter. Douglas blinked once, twice, then sat down heavily on the leather couch. Your daughter. Arthur Alexander Nightingale, a familiar voice called from the hallway leading to the bedrooms. You disappeared for over a week without a word, had the entire family terrified, and now you show up with a... Aria's rant cut off abruptly as she spotted Luna. Hello, Luna said politely, offering another small curtsy. Are you my Aunt Aria? Daddy told me about you. Aria's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, reminding me of a fish. It was possibly the first time in my life I'd seen my sister rendered speechless. Perhaps, Alice said with admirable composure, drawing on the organizational skills that kept Minerva Guild functioning. We should sit down and discuss this properly. 20 minutes later, we were gathered in the family's spacious living room, with Luna perched nervously on the edge of an armchair, while my parents and sister sat across from us, wearing expressions of barely contained shock. So let me understand this correctly, Douglas said slowly, his guild leader training helping him process information methodically. You've adopted an 8-year-old girl who was the subject of illegal experimentation by a cult organization. That's the simplified version, yes, I confirmed. And you've had her for how long exactly? Alice asked, her maternal instincts clearly warring with confusion. About a week. A week, Aria repeated hollowly. You've been a father for a week. Luna looked between all of them with growing anxiety. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I didn't mean to cause problems. If you don't want me here. Oh, sweetheart, no. Alice interrupted immediately, her motherly nature overriding all other concerns. She moved to kneel beside Luna's chair, her voice gentle. You're not causing any problems. We're just surprised. Arthur has a habit of making very important decisions without warning anyone. It's not her fault, Aria added quickly, shooting me a pointed look. It's his fault for being an impulsive idiot. Language, Aria, Alice chided automatically, though her attention remained focused on Luna. She's right though, Douglas said, though his stern expression was softening as he watched Luna's obvious nervousness. Arthur, this is a significant responsibility. I know it won't be easy, I said honestly, but Luna needed a family, and I couldn't leave her alone. Luna looked up at me with such pure adoration that I saw my mother's heart melt in real time. What happened to her parents? Alice asked gently, directing the question to Luna rather than me. I don't remember having any, Luna replied with matter-of-fact sadness. The doctors said I was made in a laboratory, but Daddy chose me anyway. The silence that followed was different this time. Not shock, but the kind of profound quiet that comes when decent people confront genuine injustice. Made in a laboratory, Douglas repeated, his voice carrying the dangerous edge it took on when he encountered something that threatened innocent people. The same tone he used when discussing guilds that exploited their members. The Red Chalice cult, I explained. They were creating artificial super soldiers. Luna was their most successful attempt. Was? Aria asked, noting my careful word choice. The enhancement process has been reversed. She's a normal child now. Alice reached out to smooth Luna's dark hair, her touch gentle. And how do you feel about that, sweetheart? Happy, Luna said immediately. I was always afraid before, afraid I might hurt someone by accident. Now I just feel light. She likes butterflies, I added, knowing it would help my mother understand Luna's true nature, and drawing and puzzles and garden stories. Alice's smile grew warm. I have some wonderful books about gardens, and there's a butterfly conservatory in the city that I think you'd love. Luna's eyes lit up. Really? With real butterflies? Hundreds of them, Alice confirmed. All different colors and sizes. I watched my family's resistance crumble in real time. Luna's genuine sweetness, combined with her obvious need for love and stability, was working its magic on their protective instincts. The Imperial Palace has been quite accommodating, I said carefully. Luna has her own room there, and Cecilia has been helping with the legal arrangements. Of course she has, Alice said with a knowing smile. That girl has been beside herself with worry. She called here 3 times yesterday asking if we'd heard anything from you. Princess Cecilia stopped by the guild office personally, Douglas added with amusement. Nearly gave our receptionist a heart attack when royalty just walked through the front door. And Princess Seraphina sent a formal inquiry through official channels. Arya contributed. Very proper and polite, but you could tell she was worried sick. I like all of them, Luna chimed in helpfully. Cecilia bought me books and toys. Rose got me pretty clothes. Seraphina teaches me about different subjects, and Rachel always smiles at me. They all say they're going to be my mommies when they marry Daddy. All of them? Alice asked with raised eyebrows, though she didn't seem particularly surprised by this revelation. Apparently, I said, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. Douglas chuckled. Well, we always knew you'd inherited your mother's ability to attract devoted followers. Though I have to admit, for princesses is impressive even by our family's standards. Douglas, Alice protested, though she was fighting a smile. What? I'm just saying running a guild has taught me to appreciate good organizational skills. Having 4 brilliant women willing to share responsibility for keeping Arthur out of trouble seems like excellent strategic planning. Luna giggled at the family dynamic, and I realized how natural this all felt. My parents had known about my complicated romantic situation for months, and while they occasionally expressed concern about the political implications, they'd accepted it with the same pragmatic approach they brought to everything else. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of getting-to-know-you conversations, with Luna gradually relaxing as she realized she was truly welcome. My parents told embarrassing stories about my childhood. Arya showed Luna some of her magical techniques, and slowly but surely, my daughter began to feel at home. As evening approached, Luna's exhaustion from the emotional day became apparent. She was trying valiantly to stay awake, but her eyelids were drooping as she listened to one of my mother's stories about managing adventurers who thought they were much more competent than they actually were. I think someone needs to get some sleep, I observed gently. Can I sleep in your room tonight, Daddy? Luna asked, her small voice carrying a vulnerability that made my chest tight. I don't want to be alone. Of course, sweetheart. After saying our goodnights and promising to visit again soon, I carried Luna to my childhood bedroom. The space felt oddly nostalgic, filled with memories of a simpler time when my biggest worry was passing academy exams and helping with basic guild paperwork. Luna curled up against my side the moment I settled into bed, her breathing evening out almost immediately as exhaustion claimed her. Within minutes, she was fast asleep, one small hand still clutching her butterfly toy. I lay there in the darkness, listening to her peaceful breathing and marveling at how completely my life had changed. A week ago, I'd been a single man focused on growing stronger and protecting those I cared about. Now I was a father, responsible for this precious child who had somehow claimed a piece of my heart I hadn't known existed. You did good today, Luna's voice whispered in my mind. She's settling in well. She's remarkable, I replied mentally. After everything she's been through, she still trusts so easily. Children are resilient, and she knows she's safe with you. A warm feeling of contentment settled over me as I prepared to drift off to sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, but for now, pain lanced through my chest like a blade. I sat up sharply, pressing a hand to my ribs as agony radiated through my torso. Something was wrong, very wrong. The sensation felt like my insides were tearing apart, as if some fundamental force was trying to rip its way out of my body. Trying not to wake Luna, I slipped carefully out of bed and stumbled toward the attached bathroom. The pain intensified with each step, and by the time I reached the sink, I could barely breathe. Another wave of agony hit, and this time I couldn't suppress the violent coughing fit that followed. Blood splattered across the white porcelain. Chapter 688. Daughter, 3. I stared at the crimson stains across the white porcelain sink, my mind racing to understand what was happening to my body. The pain in my chest had subsided to a dull ache, but the metallic taste in my mouth and the blood I just coughed up painted a clear picture. Arthur. Luna's concerned voice echoed in my mind. What's wrong? I can sense distress through our bond. I'm not sure yet, I replied, carefully wiping my mouth with a towel. Let me think. I closed my eyes and turned my focus inward, examining my mana channels with the kind of detailed analysis I should have performed immediately after waking up. What I found made my blood run cold. My magical pathways were a mess. The smooth, gradual progression that should characterize advancement to high ascendant rank had been replaced by jagged, forced expansion. My mana channels showed signs of severe strain, like a river that had been artificially widened without proper preparation. The gray power had pushed my magical development far beyond what my body was ready to handle. Oh, I thought with growing understanding. That's what this is. I had achieved high ascendant rank, yes, but through brute force rather than natural progression. The temporary cosmic power had literally forced my magical capacity to expand, shoving me past barriers that should have taken months of careful cultivation to overcome. And now my body was paying the price. Luna, I think I know what's happening, I said into our mental connection. The gray power forced my mana rank to advance too quickly. My body wasn't ready for the transition. That's not good, she replied with obvious concern. Forced advancement usually comes with severe consequences. I nodded grimly, continuing my internal examination. The damage was extensive but not immediately life-threatening. My mana channels would need time to stabilize at their new capacity, and until they did, any attempt to push my magical development further would be counterproductive at best, dangerous at worst. How long? Luna asked, reading my thoughts. At least half a year, I concluded. Maybe longer. Reaching peak ascendant rank will have to wait until my foundation solidifies. The irony wasn't lost on me. In my desperate attempt to gain enough power to protect Luna, I had potentially set back my long-term magical development. Under normal circumstances, this would have been devastating news. But as I looked back toward the bedroom where Luna slept peacefully, I found I didn't particularly care. You know what? I thought with surprising lightness. This might actually be a blessing in disguise. I had been pushing myself relentlessly for months. Training, fighting, growing stronger in preparation for threats that seemed to multiply daily. The forced break in my advancement meant I could finally do something I'd been neglecting. I could be a father. Cleaning up the blood and returning to bed, I settled carefully beside Luna, who immediately curled against my side without waking. Her peaceful breathing and the warm weight of her small body against mine filled me with a contentment I hadn't experienced in longer than I could remember. Tomorrow, I would explain my condition to the others and arrange for extended leave from active duty. For once in my life, the universe was forcing me to slow down and focus on what truly mattered. I could live with that, especially since all my plans were in motion regardless. 3 days later, I was sprawled on the living room floor of my family's penthouse, helping Luna work on a jigsaw puzzle that depicted a vast meadow filled with wildflowers. She had insisted we tackle the really hard one with 1,000 pieces, and her determination to complete it was both admirable and exhausting. This piece goes here, Daddy, Luna announced confidently, trying to force a section of blue sky into what was clearly part of a red poppy. Are you sure about that, sweetheart? I asked gently. Look at the colors. Luna examined the piece more carefully, then huffed in frustration. Why are puzzles so difficult? In the laboratory, everything had a specific place and purpose. This is much more complicated. That's what makes it fun, I said, searching for a piece that might fit the section she was working on. In real life, things don't always fit where we expect them to. Sometimes we have to try different approaches. Like how you found me? Luna asked, looking up from the puzzle with those dark eyes that still held too much wisdom for her age. Exactly like that. I wasn't looking for a daughter, but you fit perfectly into my life anyway. Luna beamed at that, returning to her puzzle with renewed enthusiasm. I'm glad I fit. So am I, sweetheart. So am I. The morning passed in comfortable domesticity. After finishing a section of the puzzle, we moved to the kitchen where Luna helped me prepare lunch, or rather, where she stood on a step stool and provided enthusiastic commentary while I actually did the cooking. The eggs are getting fluffy, she observed with delight as I scrambled them in the pan. That's the secret, I told her seriously. Low heat and patience. Good things take time. Is that why your magic training is taking longer now? Luna asked with the kind of direct perception that never failed to surprise me. I had explained my condition to her in terms she could understand, that using the gray power had been like growing too fast, and now my body needed time to catch up. She had accepted this with the same matter-of-fact pragmatism she brought to everything else. Exactly, I confirmed. Sometimes the best way to get stronger is to slow down and make sure your foundation is solid. After lunch, we settled on the balcony where Luna had set up her art supplies. The afternoon sun was perfect for drawing, and she had become fascinated with trying to capture the view of the city from our high vantage point. The buildings look like blocks from up here, she observed, carefully shading a skyscraper with her pencil. That's perspective, I explained, settling into the chair beside her. Things look different depending on where you're standing. Like how the Red Chalice people thought I was a weapon, but you see me as your daughter? I paused in reading my book, struck once again by her insight. That's actually a perfect example, Luna. Yes, exactly like that. Luna continued drawing in comfortable silence, occasionally asking for help with proportions or shading techniques. Watching her artistic process was fascinating. She approached each element methodically, with the same careful attention to detail that had probably helped her survive 8 years of captivity. Daddy? She said eventually, not looking up from her drawing. Yes, sweetheart. Are you sad that your magic isn't getting stronger right now? I considered the question seriously. A month ago, the answer would have been an immediate yes. Power meant safety, and safety meant being able to protect the people I cared about. But sitting here in the afternoon sun, watching my daughter discover the simple joy of artistic expression. No, I said honestly. I'm not sad at all. Good, Luna said with satisfaction, adding a small bird to her cityscape, because I like having you home. That evening, after my parents and Arya had returned from the guild office, we gathered for dinner as a family. Luna regaled them with detailed accounts of our day, the puzzle progress, the cooking lesson, her artwork, while my mother made appropriately impressed sounds and my father asked thoughtful questions about her artistic techniques. And tomorrow, Luna announced as dessert was served, Daddy is going to teach me how to play chess. Chess. Douglas raised an eyebrow. That's quite an ambitious game for someone your age. I'm very smart, Luna said with 8-year-old confidence. Daddy says I have good strategic thinking from all the pattern recognition training I had before. She does, I confirmed. Luna sees connections and possibilities that most adults miss. Well then, Alice said with a smile, I suppose we'll have another chess player in the family. Though I should warn you, Luna, your grandfather is quite competitive. I can be competitive too, Luna replied seriously. But Daddy says games are supposed to be fun, not scary. The conversation continued in that warm, easy way that had become natural over the past few days. Luna was settling into family life with remarkable ease, her natural intelligence and curiosity making her a joy to be around. Watching her laugh at Arya's terrible jokes and listen intently to Douglas's stories about guild management, I felt a profound sense of rightness. Later, as I tucked Luna into bed, she looked up at me with sleepy contentment. Daddy, today was perfect. Was it? I asked, smoothing her dark hair. We didn't have to fight anyone or worry about bad people or think about magic ranks. We just got to be a family. I leaned down to kiss her forehead. We get to be a family every day now, sweetheart. That's what families do. Even when you get stronger again? Especially then. Being strong means I can protect our family, but being together is what makes us a family in the first place. Luna smiled sleepily, clutching her butterfly toy. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, Luna. Sweet dreams. As I turned off the lights and headed to my own room, I reflected on how much my priorities had shifted. A year ago, if someone had told me I'd be content to put my magical advancement on hold to play house with an 8-year-old, I would have thought they were insane. But contentment, I was learning, was a different kind of strength entirely. And sometimes, the most important battles were fought not with magic or swords, but with patience, love, and the simple act of being present for the people who mattered most. Chapter 689. Daughter, 4. The towering headquarters of Guild Ouroboros stood like a monument to ambition in the heart of the capital's guild district. The sleek glass and steel structure, with its distinctive serpentine logo, commanded respect and no small amount of wariness from passers-by. Wow, Luna breathed as we approached the main entrance, her small hand clasped firmly in mine. It's really tall, and kind of scary. Only to people who aren't family, I assured her, noting how the security guard straightened to attention as the automatic doors recognized my biometric signature. Everyone inside works for me, which means they work for you too now. The grand lobby bustled with activity, adventurers receiving mission briefings on holographic displays, support staff coordinating logistics through advanced communication systems, and junior members training in the practice areas visible through reinforced glass walls. The moment we entered, conversations quieted as members took notice of their guild master's unexpected appearance. And more specifically, the little girl walking beside him. Guild Master, a familiar voice called out across the lobby. Elias Vance, my secretary and one of the most organized individuals I'd ever met, approached with his usual mixture of relief and exasperation. The man was in his early 30s, with neat brown hair and the kind of precise bearing that made him invaluable for managing the administrative nightmare that was a gold-ranked guild. Elias? I greeted him with a slight smile. I trust everything has been running smoothly in my absence? Define smoothly, he replied with the kind of dry wit that had made me hire him in the first place. The guild hasn't burned down. Nobody has died from paperwork-related stress, and Vice Guild Master Melkith has only threatened to quit twice this week. Only twice? She's mellowing in her old age. I heard that. An indignant voice called from the elevator area. Callie Melkith emerged with the fluid grace of someone who could probably eliminate half the people in the lobby without breaking a sweat. As my Vice Guild Master and one of the strongest combatants in the guild, she commanded respect through a combination of devastating magical ability and an even more devastating tongue. Her black hair was pulled back in its usual practical ponytail, and her dark eyes blazed with the righteous fury of someone who had been handling far too much administrative responsibility lately. At 20, she was only a year older than me, but her maturity and strategic mind had made her the obvious choice for Vice Guild Master when I'd established Ouroboros. Arthur Nightingale, she said with dangerous sweetness. You disappeared for over a week without a word, left me to handle 3 major contract negotiations, 2 guild expansion proposals, and a diplomatic incident. I hope you have a very good explanation. I do, I replied calmly. I became a father. Callie's rant died in her throat as she noticed Luna for the first time. The little girl had been partially hidden behind my leg, but now she stepped forward with the polite courage I'd come to admire. Hello, Luna said, offering a small curtsy. I'm Luna Nightingale. Are you the person who yells at Daddy about work? The silence that followed was absolute. Then Callie's stern expression cracked, replaced by something approaching wonder. You're. She looked between Luna and me, then back to Luna. You're adorable. How does such a sweet little angel belong to this evil man? Daddy's not evil, Luna protested with 8-year-old indignation. He saved me from bad people and gives me butterfly toys and reads me stories. He reads you stories? Callie asked with mock amazement. Are you sure we're talking about the same Arthur Nightingale? The one who considers paperwork a form of cruel and unusual punishment. I read very good stories, I said with dignity. This is incredible, Callie continued, kneeling down to Luna's eye level. You're like a miracle worker. I've been trying to civilize this barbarian for years. Luna giggled. Daddy says you're very good at your job, but you worry too much. He's right about both things, Callie admitted, though I notice he didn't mention that I do all the actual work around here. If you can't handle the guild operations without me, I said with a deliberately casual shrug, maybe you should hand back your gold rank certification. I'm sure there are plenty of other Vice Guild Masters who'd appreciate the challenge. Callie's eye twitched. You absolute. She caught herself, glancing at Luna. You absolute. Mine. Luna looked confused. Was she going to say a bad word? Probably several, I confirmed. Don't worry, sweetheart, Callie said, patting Luna's shoulder. I save all my really creative cursing for when your daddy isn't hiding behind adorable children. I'm not hiding, I protested. I'm strategically positioning myself near my most effective ally. Elias cleared his throat diplomatically. Perhaps we should move this discussion to the office? There are quite a few matters that require the guild master's attention. Of course there are, I sighed. Callie, I want you to know that despite my teasing, I do appreciate everything you've done. The guild expansion is reaching a critical point, and I know the workload has been overwhelming. Callie's expression softened slightly. It has been intense. The preparations for the Aetheryte release are more complex than we anticipated, and the political maneuvering around territorial rights is getting nasty. The timeline? Still manageable. We have perhaps 6 months before the market is ready, which gives us time to finalize the distribution networks and security protocols. She glanced at Luna, then back to me. But I need you functional, Arthur. Whatever happened during your mission, you look like hell. Magical advancement complications, I explained briefly. I'll need to take things easier for the next few months while my foundation stabilizes. Nothing life-threatening, just inconvenient timing. Of course it is, Callie muttered. You have the worst timing in the world. Daddy's magic grew too fast. Luna chimed in helpfully. So now he has to wait for his body to catch up. It's like when you eat too much candy and get a tummy ache. That's actually not a terrible analogy, Elias said thoughtfully. Speaking of complications, Callie said with a wicked grin, pulling out her phone to show the latest news headlines. The press has been having a field day with photos of you and Luna leaving the Imperial Palace. I grimaced at the trending story. Guild Master's secret daughter? Exclusive photos inside. Social media is going crazy, Callie continued cheerfully. Speculation ranges from secret affair with foreign nobility to adoption of war orphan to elaborate publicity stunt for guild expansion. I glanced at the article, then shrugged. Let them speculate. I don't owe them any explanations about my personal life. That's what I told the 17 reporters who've called asking for interviews, Elias said. Though I should mention that several major guilds have reached out expressing concern about your sudden family responsibilities affecting guild operations. Let me guess. They're hoping to poach some of our contracts while I'm distracted? The Crimson Hawks were particularly transparent about their intentions, Callie said with disgust. I may have been somewhat direct in my response to their inquiry. Define direct. I told them that if they thought a single child could compromise Ouroboros' operational capacity, they were welcome to test that theory in a formal guild competition. I grinned. And their response? Suddenly they remembered urgent business elsewhere. We spent the next hour in my office, with Luna quietly working on a coloring book in the corner while I caught up on the most pressing guild matters. The Aetheryte project was indeed progressing well. The revolutionary substance we'd been developing would soon revolutionize mana tech across the world. But the political and economic implications meant every detail had to be perfect. All right, I said finally, closing the last urgent file on my tablet. That covers the immediate crises. Luna, ready to head home. Can I come back tomorrow? She asked hopefully. I like watching you work. And Miss Callie promised to show me the training rooms. Did she now? I looked at my vice guild master with raised eyebrows. What? She's curious about guild operations. It's never too early to start leadership training. She's 8 years old. So, I started combat training at 4. You started combat training because your family were battle maniacs. And look how well I turned out. I decided not to comment on that particular claim. After dropping Luna back at the penthouse with promises to return for dinner, I made my way back to the guild. The backlog of digital paperwork was substantial, and while Callie and Elias had handled the urgent matters admirably, there were decisions that only the guild master could make. I had been working for perhaps an hour when the office door opened without a knock. Only one person had that particular privilege. You look tired, Reka observed as she entered, closing the door behind her and activating the privacy wards with practiced efficiency. Long day, I admitted, not looking up from the contract I was reviewing on my screen. How did you know I was here? Callie mentioned you'd returned to handle the backlog. Reka moved around the desk with her characteristic silent grace. She also mentioned that Luna is absolutely adorable, and that you've somehow become even more insufferable as a father, which I disagree with, Master. I prefer confidently paternal. Without ceremony, Reka settled onto the floor beside my chair and rested her head against my thigh. It was a position that had become routine over the months, her way of being close while I worked, offering comfort through simple presence. How are you, Master? She asked quietly, her violet eyes reflecting genuine concern. I set down my stylus and let my hands settle in her silver hair. Tired. Worried about the advancement complications. Trying to figure out how to balance guild responsibilities with being a proper father. You're already a wonderful father, Reika said firmly. Luna adores you, and she's thriving under your care. As for the guild, she shrugged slightly. Ouroboros has excellent leadership at every level. It can function while you focus on what matters most. And what matters most? Luna, Master's health, the people you love. She tilted her head to look up at me. In that order, we settled into comfortable silence, Reika's presence grounding me as I worked through the remaining digital files. Outside the office windows, the city lights began to twinkle as evening approached. Somewhere across town, Luna was probably pestering my parents with questions about guild management or showing off her latest drawing. For the first time in months, I felt truly at peace. Chapter 690, Violet Blooms, 1. I watched Master's profile as he worked, noting the subtle signs of fatigue that others might miss. The slight tension in his shoulders, the way his azure eyes occasionally lost focus, the careful way he held himself as if movement might aggravate some hidden pain. He was pushing himself again, despite his body's need for rest. Master, I said softly, my voice carrying all the concern I couldn't quite hide. You should take a break. Almost finished, he murmured, not looking away from his screen. Just need to approve these final resource allocations for the Aetheryte security protocols. I shifted slightly, pressing closer to his leg where my head rested. This position had become natural over the months, close enough to offer comfort, unobtrusive enough that he could work without distraction. It was my way of taking care of him when he wouldn't take care of himself. The guild will survive if you finish tomorrow, I pointed out gently. Luna is waiting for you at home. That got his attention. Master's hand stilled on his stylus, and I saw his expression soften as it always did when Luna was mentioned. The transformation from guild master to devoted father never failed to make my chest warm with affection. You're right, he admitted, finally looking down at me with those eyes that had first captured my attention years ago. I suppose I am being unnecessarily thorough. It's one of your more endearing flaws, I said with a small smile, though your tendency to overwork yourself when stressed is less charming. Master's hand found my hair, his fingers threading through the silver strands with the kind of gentle touch that still made my heart skip. When did my devoted assassin become such a wise counselor? I've always been wise, Master. You just finally learned to listen to me instead of charging headfirst into danger. I don't charge headfirst into danger, he protested mildly. I raised an eyebrow. The Red Chalice Monastery? That was strategic. The vampire nest in the Northern Territories? Calculated risk. The incident with the corrupted dungeon core that nearly. All right, point taken, Master interrupted with a rueful laugh. Perhaps I have been somewhat impulsive in my approach to problem solving. Somewhat, I agreed dryly, like how a hurricane is somewhat windy. Master chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest in a way that made me want to curl closer. These quiet moments were precious, when he wasn't the legendary Arthur Nightingale, guild master and hero, but simply the man I'd chosen to follow, to serve, to love. There, he said, finally closing the last file on his tablet. Officially caught up on the backlog. Callie can't complain about my work ethic for at least another week. She'll find something else to complain about, I observed. It's part of her charm. True. Though I suspect having Luna around will soften her edges considerably. Master's expression grew thoughtful. She's already completely smitten. I caught her looking up child-friendly training techniques on her phone. Luna has that effect on people, I said softly. She brings out protective instincts in everyone she meets. Including you? I considered the question seriously. Especially me. She's precious to you, Master, which makes her precious to me. And beyond that, I paused, searching for the right words. She deserves to have a normal childhood after everything she's endured. Protecting that innocence feels important. Master's fingers stilled in my hair, and when I looked up, I found him watching me with an expression of such tenderness it made my breath catch. I love you, he said simply, the words carrying all the weight of absolute truth, not just your loyalty or your skills or your devotion. I love you, Reika, all of you. Heat flooded my cheeks, but I didn't look away. I love you too, Master, more than I ever thought possible. Arthur, he corrected gently, when it's just us, you don't have to use titles. I like calling you Master, I admitted, feeling my face grow warmer. It reminds me that I chose this, that I chose you. Master Arthur reached down to cup my face in his hands, his thumbs brushing across my cheekbones with infinite gentleness. Stand up. I obeyed without question, rising from my position on the floor to stand before his chair. Arthur's hands remained on my face, his azure eyes searching mine with an intensity that made my heart race. Come here, he said softly, his voice carrying a note of invitation that sent shivers down my spine. I moved closer, allowing him to guide me as his hands settled on my waist. The motion was natural, inevitable. Arthur pulling me down as I straddled his lap, our faces now level with each other. This close, I could see the flecks of silver in his eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. Better, he murmured, his forehead resting against mine. Much better. Master, I whispered, the title carrying all my devotion, all my love, all my absolute trust in this man who had saved me from darkness and given me purpose. My Reka, he replied, and then his lips found mine. The kiss was gentle at first, tender and exploratory, as if we had all the time in the world. I melted into his touch, my hands coming up to rest on his chest where I could feel his heartbeat steady and strong beneath my palms. This was home. Not a place, but this feeling of perfect rightness when I was in his arms. The kiss deepened, a slow, intoxicating pull that sent heat curling through my veins. Arthur's lips moved against mine with a quiet hunger, his hands tightening on my waist as if anchoring himself to me. I pressed closer, my fingers curling into his shirt, savoring the warmth of his chest beneath my palms. Every touch, every shift of his mouth, stoked the fire building inside me, and I couldn't help the soft sound that escaped my throat. A needy edge to it that made Arthur pause, his breath hitching. I'd mentioned Luna to get him to stop working, to pull him away from the endless demands of the guild. It had worked, as it always did, her name a gentle spell that softened his edges. But the truth? I'd wanted this, wanted him, not just the quiet moments of tenderness, but this, the way his hands roamed my sides, the way his azure eyes darkened when he looked at me, the way he made my body sing with every touch. My violet hair spilled over my shoulders, catching the dim light of his office, and I knew my flower-shaped eyes were glowing faintly, betraying the desire I couldn't hide. Reka, he murmured against my lips, his voice low and rough, sending shivers racing down my spine. His hands slid upward, fingers grazing the curve of my ribs through my shirt, and I arched into his touch, silently begging for more. When his palms brushed over my chest, cupping me gently, a sharp gasp tore from me, my head tilting back as heat flooded my core. Arthur? I whispered, the name slipping out like a plea. His thumbs traced slow circles over the fabric, teasing, and I squirmed in his lap, feeling the hard evidence of his own desire pressing against me. The sensation made my thoughts scatter, my body humming with need. I'd wanted him for myself tonight, and now that I had him, I wasn't letting go. His mouth found my neck, lips grazing the sensitive skin just below my ear, and I shivered, my hands sliding up to tangle in his black hair. Your trouble, he said, his voice a warm rumble against my skin. You know that, don't you? Only for you, I managed, my voice breathy as his hands slipped under my shirt, calloused fingers brushing bare skin. The contact sent a jolt through me, and I tugged at his hair, pulling his mouth back to mine. The kiss was hungrier now, all pretense of restraint gone as our tongues met, a dance of heat and want that left me dizzy. I broke away just long enough to fumble with the buttons of his shirt, my fingers trembling with urgency. Off? I demanded, and Arthur's soft laugh vibrated against my lips. Impatient, he teased, but he helped me, shrugging the fabric off his shoulders to reveal the lean, scarred planes of his chest. My hands roamed over him, tracing the familiar marks of battles fought and survived, each one a testament to the man I loved. My gaze flicked up to meet his, those azure eyes burning with the same intensity one felt, and I knew he was as lost in this as I was. Your turn, he said, his voice a low command that sent a thrill through me. His hands tugged at the hem of my shirt, and I raised my arms, letting him pull it over my head. The cool air of the office hit my skin, but Arthur's hands were warm, cupping my bare chest with a reverence that made my heart ache even as it stoked my desire. His thumbs brushed over sensitive peaks, and I moaned softly, my hips shifting against him instinctively. Gods, Reka, he groaned, his forehead pressing against mine as his hands explored, teasing and kneading with a touch that was both gentle and possessive. My violet eyes fluttered shut, my body trembling under the weight of his attention. I'd wanted him to stop working, yes, but this was what I'd craved. Him, all mine, in the stolen moment where the world outside didn't exist. I reached for his belt, fingers deft despite the haze of want clouding my mind. I need you, I whispered, the words raw and honest, and Arthur's hand stilled, his gaze locking onto mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. Chapter 691. Violet Blooms. 2. My heart pounded as I slid down from Arthur's lap, my knees brushing the carpet as I settled between his legs. The heat in my body was overwhelming, a fire kindled by my desperate need to please him, to show him the depth of my devotion. My violet, flower-shaped eyes flicked up to meet his azure ones, and the way he looked at me, tender, hungry, trusting, made my chest tighten with love. I wanted to give him everything, to worship him in a way that left no doubt of my loyalty, my desire. I'd never done this before. The thought sent a nervous flutter through me, my inexperience a quiet weight in my mind. But this was Arthur, my master, the man I'd chosen to serve and love with every fiber of my being. I wanted to try to make him feel as cherished as he made me feel. My hands rested on his thighs, fingers trembling slightly as I leaned forward, my violet hair spilling over my shoulders like a curtain. Reka, Arthur said softly, his voice a warm anchor. His hand brushed my cheek, thumb tracing my lower lip, and I nuzzled into his touch, my eyes never leaving his. You don't have to. I want to, I interrupted, my voice firm despite the flush creeping up my neck. I want to please you, master. Let me. His breath hitched, and the way his gaze darkened sent a thrill through me. He nodded, his hands sliding to my hair, fingers tangling gently in the silver strands. All right, love, take it slow. I swallowed hard, my lips parting as I took him in, the warmth and unfamiliarity making my movements hesitant. My tongue flicked out, tentative, and I tried to mimic what I'd respond to in stories, but my rhythm was clumsy, unsure. A soft groan from Arthur spurred me on, but I could feel my own uncertainty, the worry that I wasn't good enough for him. Easy, Arthur murmured, his voice steady, guiding. His hand tightened slightly in my hair, not forceful but grounding, and he tilted my head just so. Like this, Reka, slow and steady. He guided my movements, a gentle push and pull that set a rhythm, his fingers bobbing my head with care. The motion felt natural under his direction, and I relaxed into it, my devotion to him overriding my nerves. I focused on him, on the way his breath caught, the way his thighs tensed under my hands, the way his low groans filled the quiet office. Every sound he made was a gift, proof that I was giving him pleasure, that my love for him was enough. My lips moved with more confidence now, guided by his hand, and I poured every ounce of my adoration into the act, wanting him to feel how much he meant to me. You're doing so well, love, Arthur said, his voice rough with desire but laced with tenderness. His words sent warmth flooding through me, and I hummed softly, the vibration drawing another groan from him. My eyes flicked up again, meeting his, and the raw affection in his gaze made my heart swell. This was my master, my Arthur, and I'd give him everything, my loyalty, my heart, my body, my soul. His hand stilled my movements for a moment, his thumb brushing over my cheek as he looked down at me. Gods, Reka, you're perfect, he whispered, and the words hit me like a wave, filling me with pride and love. I leaned into his touch, my lips still around him, and redoubled my efforts, wanting to show him just how much I cherished him, even if I wasn't skilled yet. For him, I'd learn. For him, I'd do anything. My lips moved under Arthur's gentle guidance, his hand in my violet hair a steady presence as he bobbed my head with care. The taste of him, the warmth, the intimacy of this act. It was all for him, a testament to my devotion. My flower-shaped eyes stayed locked on his azure ones whenever I could, drinking in the way his expression softened with pleasure, the way his love for me shone through even in this heated moment. My inexperience showed in the occasional falter of my rhythm, the moments where I wasn't sure how much pressure to use, but Arthur never faltered in his patience. Just like that, he murmured, his voice a low rumble that sent shivers down my spine. His fingers tightened briefly in my hair, encouraging, and I followed his lead, letting him guide me into a smoother pace. Every groan, every hitch of his breath, was a reward, proof that I was pleasing him, that my love was enough. My hands gripped his thighs, anchoring me as I poured my heart into this act. I'd never felt so vulnerable, so open, but with Arthur, it was safe. He was my master, the man who'd saved me, who'd given me purpose, and now I wanted to give him pleasure in return. My devotion to him was absolute, a flame that burned brighter with every touch, every whispered word. Reka, he groaned, his voice breaking slightly, and the sound of my name on his lips made my chest ache with love. His hand stilled my movements, pulling me back gently, and I looked up at him, lips parted, my face flushed with effort and desire. His thumb brushed over my swollen lips, his gaze so tender it nearly undid me. You're incredible, he said, his voice raw. Come here. I rose on shaky legs, my body humming with need and love, and he pulled me back into his lap, his lips finding mine in a kiss that was both fierce and reverent. My devotion to him was unwavering, and as his hands roamed my bare skin, I knew I'd give him everything, always, in every way he'd let me. Arthur's lips moved against mine, a slow, searing kiss that poured all his love and desire into me. My body trembled in his lap, pressed skin to skin, the heat of him grounding me even as my heart raced with anticipation. My violet, flower-shaped eyes met his azure ones, and the tenderness in his gaze steadied me, reminding me that this was my master, my Arthur, the man I trusted with everything. My devotion to him was absolute, and now, as his hands settled on my hips, I knew I was ready to give him this part of myself, too. Reka, he murmured, his voice low and warm, his forehead resting against mine. We can stop if you're not sure. I'm sure, I whispered, my voice steady despite the nervous flutter in my chest. My hands rested on his shoulders, fingers digging into the firm muscle as I leaned closer, my violet hair spilling over us like a curtain. I want you, Arthur, all of you. His eyes softened, and he kissed me again, gentle but deep, as his hands guided me upward. I felt him, hard and warm, pressing against me, and a shiver ran through me. Not fear, but the overwhelming intensity of wanting him. I was a virgin, untouched before this moment, and the thought of taking him, of feeling him inside me, sent a mix of nerves and desire curling through my core. Slow, love, Arthur said, his voice a soothing anchor. One hand stayed on my hip, steadying me, while the other slid between us, guiding himself to my entrance. The first touch made me gasp, my body tensing instinctively at the unfamiliar sensation. He paused, his thumb brushing soothing circles on my hip. Breathe, Rekha. I've got you. I nodded, exhaling shakily, trusting him completely. My eyes stayed locked on his as I lowered myself, feeling the slow, careful stretch as he began to enter me. He was big, bigger than I'd imagined, and the sensation was overwhelming, a mix of pressure and heat that made my breath catch. I bit my lip, my fingers tightening on his shoulders, but Arthur's steady gaze and gentle touch kept me grounded. That's it, he murmured, his voice low and encouraging. Take your time. You're doing so well. The stretch burned slightly, my body adjusting to him, but the slow pace and his constant reassurance made it bearable. More than bearable. It felt right, like this was where I was meant to be, joined with him in this intimate, sacred way. I sank lower, inch by inch, my walls clenching around him as he filled me, and a soft whimper escaped my lips at the fullness, the way he seemed to reach every part of me. Gods, Rekha? Arthur groaned, his voice tight with restraint, his hands trembling slightly on my hips. You feel perfect. His words sent warmth flooding through me, easing the tension in my body. I leaned forward, pressing my forehead to his, my violet eyes shimmering with emotion as I took him deeper. The discomfort was fading now, replaced by a growing pleasure, a sense of completeness that made my heart swell. This was my master, my love, and I was giving him everything, just as he'd given me purpose and safety. When I finally settled fully against him, his length buried inside me, I let out a shaky breath, my body trembling with the intensity of it. Arthur's hands roamed my back, soothing, grounding, and he kissed me softly, giving me time to adjust. You okay? He asked, his voice gentle but laced with desire. More than okay? I whispered, my voice thick with love. I shifted slightly, testing the sensation, and a spark of pleasure shot through me, making me gasp. Arthur, it feels good. He smiled, a mix of pride and adoration, and guided my hips in a slow, gentle roll. The movement sent another wave of pleasure through me, and I moaned softly, my head tilting back as my body began to move with his. Every thrust was slow, deliberate, his size stretching me in a way that was both overwhelming and exquisite. My devotion to him poured into every motion, every touch, as I gave myself to him completely, my heart and body his. Arthur's hands guided my hips, setting a slow, steady rhythm as I moved with him, each motion drawing soft gasps from my lips. The stretch of him inside me, so big and warm, was still intense, but the discomfort had melted into pleasure, a deep, pulsing heat that built with every careful thrust. My violet, flower-shaped eyes stayed locked on his azure ones, the connection between us as powerful as the physical act, my devotion to him woven into every shudder, every moan. Rekha, he groaned, his voice rough with desire, his fingers digging into my hips as he fought to keep the pace slow, giving my body time to adjust. You're so beautiful, so perfect. His words made my heart soar, and I leaned forward, capturing his lips in a kiss that was both tender and desperate. My hands slid from his shoulders to his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath my palms, and I poured all my love into the kiss, into the way my body moved with his. The slow penetration, the way he filled me so completely, was overwhelming in the best way, a testament to how deeply I trusted him, how fully I'd given myself to him. My walls clenched around him, drawing a low groan from his throat, and I smiled against his lips, relishing the power I had to affect him. Master? I whispered, the title slipping out, heavy with adoration, and his eyes darkened, his hands tightening on me. Arthur? He corrected gently, but there was no reprimand in his voice, only love, only need. He guided me into another slow thrust, deeper this time, and I moaned, my head falling back as pleasure sparked through me. My violet hair swayed with the motion, catching the dim light, and I felt like I was glowing, my body and soul alight with him. Every movement was deliberate, his size stretching me in a way that made me feel claimed, cherished, whole. My inexperience didn't matter. Not with Arthur's steady hands, his soft words, his unwavering care. This was my first time, but it was with him, and that made it perfect. My devotion to him was absolute, and as we moved together, slow and intimate, I knew I'd give him this, give him everything, for as long as he'd have me. Chapter 692. Daughter, 5. I looked down at Rekha's peaceful sleeping face, her violet hair spread across the small couch in my office like spilled amethyst. We had cleaned up after our intimate moment, and she had changed into the spare nightgown she kept in my office for occasions when work ran late. The exhaustion of the past week must have finally caught up with her. She looked so young when she slept, the careful composure she maintained during waking hours replaced by soft vulnerability. It was a reminder that despite her lethal skills and unwavering loyalty, Rekha was still only 20 on her, barely older than me, carrying burdens that would have broken most people her age. She needs proper rest, I thought, carefully gathering her into my arms. And Luna is probably wondering where I am. The guild headquarters was quiet at this late hour, most of the staff having gone home hours ago. Only the night security team remained, and they nodded respectfully as I carried Reika through the lobby toward the exit. If they found anything unusual about their guild master leaving with his unconscious vice captain in his arms, they were too professional to comment. The ride back to the penthouse was peaceful, Reika's steady breathing the only sound in the car's interior. She stirred slightly when we hit a bump, unconsciously pressing closer to my chest, but didn't wake. Whatever dreams she was having seemed content, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. The penthouse was dark when I arrived, the automatic lights dimming to their nighttime setting as I entered. My parents and Arya had clearly gone to bed hours ago, responsible adults who understood the concept of reasonable sleeping schedules, unlike their workaholic son. I made my way quietly down the hallway, intending to settle Reika in the guest room before checking on Luna. But when I reached my childhood bedroom, I discovered it was already occupied. Luna was curled up in the center of my bed. Her dark hair spread across the pillow and her butterfly toy clutched tightly in her small arms. She wore the new pajamas my mother had bought her. Soft pink fabric decorated with tiny stars that seemed to shimmer in the ambient light from the window. Despite having her own beautifully decorated room just down the hall, she had chosen to wait for me here. She still doesn't feel secure sleeping alone, I realized with a pang of protective tenderness. After 8 years of laboratory cells and constant supervision, of course she'd want to stay close. The sight of her small form in my too large bed made my chest tighten with emotion. This was what family looked like, not just sharing DNA or legal documents, but this instinctive need to be near the people who made you feel safe. I looked down at Reika's sleeping face, then back at Luna. Making a decision that felt completely natural, I carefully settled Reika on the far side of the bed, tucking her under the covers with gentle precision. She murmured something unintelligible but didn't wake, automatically curling toward the warmth of the mattress. After changing into my own sleepwear, I slipped into the space between them. Luna immediately sensed my presence, even in sleep, shifting closer until her small body was pressed against my side. Reika, guided by the same unconscious instincts, moved until her head found my shoulder. This is probably the most unconventional family arrangement in the Empire, I thought with amusement, looking up at the ceiling of my childhood room. A reincarnated soul, an artificially created child, and a devoted sword, all sharing a bed like some sort of heartwarming storybook. And 3 princesses and daughter of a marquis as well. But it felt right. More right than anything had felt in longer than I could remember. I woke to the sensation of being thoroughly entangled. Luna had apparently decided during the night that I was in danger of escaping, because she had wrapped herself around my arm like a determined octopus. Her small form was pressed against my side, one leg thrown over my waist and both arms hugging my bicep with impressive determination. Her dark hair had escaped its braid during sleep, creating a silky curtain that tickled my shoulder. "Daddy," she mumbled into my sleeve, still deep in dreams. "Don't go away again." The words hit me like a physical blow, carrying all the abandonment and fear she'd experienced in her short life. Even in sleep, some part of her was terrified that the safety and love she'd found might disappear without warning. "Never again," I promised silently, pressing a gentle kiss to the top of her head. "You're stuck with me now, sweetheart, whether you like it or not." Reika had maintained her position against my shoulder throughout the night, her violet hair creating a protective curtain around her face. But I could tell from her breathing that she was starting to wake up, the subtle shift from deep sleep to drowsy awareness that came with years of combat training. "Good morning," I whispered, careful not to wake Luna. Reika responded intelligently, nuzzling closer to my neck. "Is this real, or am I dreaming about domestic bliss again?" "Real," I confirmed, amused by her sleepy honesty. "Though I suspect domestic bliss with us will always be slightly more complicated than average. Because you collect dangerous people like some men collect vintage cars? Because we're all beautifully broken in our own ways," I corrected gently. "And somehow, those broken pieces fit together perfectly." Reika lifted her head to look at me, her violet eyes still soft with sleep but growing more alert by the moment. Her gaze shifted to Luna's determined grip on my arm, and her expression melted into something approaching maternal tenderness. "She's holding on pretty tightly," she observed quietly. "She has abandonment issues," I explained. "It's going to take time for her to believe that this is permanent." "Then we'll give her time," Reika said with the same matter-of-fact certainty she brought to mission planning. "However long it takes." The simple declaration, spoken with absolute conviction, made my heart clench with gratitude. This was why I loved her. Not just her loyalty or her skills, but her instinctive understanding of what family meant. The way she automatically included herself in Luna's healing process, accepting responsibility for this child who wasn't biologically related to either of us. "We should probably get up," I said reluctantly, noting the brightening light through the bedroom windows. "My mother will want to make Luna breakfast, and if we sleep too late, she'll start worrying." "5 more minutes," Reika requested, settling back against my shoulder. "This is too perfect to interrupt just yet." I couldn't argue with that logic. Outside our peaceful bubble, There would be guild responsibilities and political maneuvering, magical complications and potential threats. But here, in this moment, we were just a family enjoying a quiet morning together. Luna stirred slightly, her grip on my arm tightening as consciousness began to return. "Daddy?" she mumbled, not opening her eyes. "Are you really here?" "I'm really here, sweetheart," I assured her, my free hand gently smoothing her disheveled hair. "And I'm not going anywhere." "Good," she said with sleepy satisfaction, apparently deciding that confirmation was sufficient. "Reika's here too. I can smell her shampoo." "Very observant," Reika said with amusement, finally lifting her head to look at Luna properly. "How did you sleep?" "Better," Luna admitted, finally opening her dark eyes to look between us. "It's nice having family close by. In the laboratory, I always slept alone. It was scary." "You'll never have to sleep alone again if you don't want to," I promised. "This is your home now, Luna. Our home. And family takes care of each other." Chapter 693. Amrita 1. 3 weeks had passed since Luna's integration into our family, and I had settled into a routine that balanced my responsibilities with my need for recovery. My mornings belonged to Luna, breakfast together, helping with her lessons, ensuring she felt secure and loved. My afternoons and evenings were split between Guild Ouroboros operations and the increasingly critical Aetheryte development project. The warp gate network between Avalon City and Luminarch had become as familiar as my own bedroom. The instantaneous travel between continents still felt surreal, but the convenience was undeniable. The brief moment of dimensional displacement gave me just enough time to mentally shift between my roles as Guild Master and Project Coordinator. Today marked my 4th visit to the Creighton Estates primary research facility, and as always, the contrast between the 2 locations was striking. Avalon City, with its towering spires and the magnificent tower of magic dominating the skyline, represented tradition and established magical academia. Luminarch, by comparison, was a testament to innovation and forward-thinking, sleek research complexes nestled among carefully maintained gardens, where the Creighton family had built their reputation as the Empire's premier magical industrialists. Guild Master Nightingale, Dr. Marcus Webb greeted me as I emerged from the estate's private warp gate chamber. The facility's deputy director was a nervous man in his 50s, brilliant in his field but clearly intimidated by the political implications of our joint project. "Lady Priscilla is waiting for you in Lab 7. She asked me to mention that today's demonstration might be significant." "Arthur," Rachel's familiar voice called out before I could respond to Webb. The Saintess appeared from one of the adjacent corridors, her usual warm smile brightening the sterile hallway. "Perfect timing. Aunt Priscilla's been practically vibrating with excitement all morning." "Rachel." I greeted her with genuine pleasure. Between my recovery period and her duties here at the estate, we'd had fewer opportunities to spend time together lately. "How are the theoretical preparations progressing?" "Beyond our most optimistic projections," she replied, falling into step beside me as we headed toward Lab 7. "Aunt Priscilla believes we're on the verge of something unprecedented." We reached Lab 7, and I could immediately sense the excitement among the research staff. Whatever had them so animated was clearly more than routine progress. The lab itself was a marvel of modern magical engineering. Crystalline conduits channeled pure mana through intricate geometric patterns, while monitoring equipment tracked energy fluctuations with precision that would have been impossible just a decade ago. At the center of it all sat a complex apparatus that represented months of theoretical work and practical refinement. "Arthur," Priscilla's voice called out as we entered. Perfect timing. I was just preparing for the final phase. Priscilla Creighton stood at the center of the lab like a conductor preparing for a symphony. At 48, she was 2 years older than her famous younger brother Alastair, but where he was known for raw magical power and combat prowess, she had built her reputation on pure intellectual brilliance. Her silver hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her blue eyes sparkled with the kind of focused intensity that had made her the youngest person ever to achieve Grandmaster rank in alchemical theory. As Rachel's aunt, Priscilla had taken a personal interest in ensuring the project's success would benefit the Saintess's future endeavors, though her primary motivation was clearly the pursuit of scientific achievement. Dr. Creighton. I greeted her formally, though we'd grown comfortable with each other over the past few weeks of collaboration. "Please, just Priscilla," she said with a wave of her hand, not looking away from the complex apparatus she was adjusting. "We're about to make history together. I think we can drop the titles." "How close are we?" I asked, moving to examine the readouts on the nearest monitoring station. "Closer than the Tower of Magic Suspects," Priscilla replied with satisfaction. "Their theoretical models are sound, but their practical implementation has been conservative. They're still treating Aetheryte synthesis like traditional alchemy, trying to force magical enhancement through brute force and complex formulae." She gestured to her apparatus with obvious pride. I took a different approach. Instead of trying to artificially create the conditions for Aetheryte formation, I studied the natural processes that produce it in dungeon cores. The key isn't power, it's precision. I had been following the project's development closely, but Priscilla's explanations never failed to impress me. Her understanding of magical theory operated on a level that made even experienced mages feel like students. "The Tower's team is focusing on quantity," she continued, making minute adjustments to the crystalline matrix. They want to produce Aetheryte in large batches for mass distribution. But I realized that the first breakthrough needs to be about purity and stability. Once we prove the concept works, scaling up becomes an engineering problem rather than a theoretical one. And you believe today's test will provide that proof? Priscilla's grin was answer enough. Better than that. Today's test will produce the first stable Aetheryte elixir in recorded history. The stabilization matrix is based on principles I derived, Priscilla explained as she began the activation sequence. The natural resonance patterns in those cores provided the missing piece of the puzzle. I watched with fascination as the apparatus came to life. Energy flowed through the crystalline conduits in patterns that seemed almost organic, while the monitoring equipment tracked thousands of variables simultaneously. A small vial of clear liquid sat in the central chamber, ready for transformation. Mana saturation beginning. Dr. Webb reported from his position at the main control station. Crystalline matrix achieving resonance lock. Energy patterns stabilizing at optimal frequency, added another researcher. No signs of cascade failure. Rachel moved to a secondary station, monitoring the spiritual aspects of the transformation process. Her knowledge of divine magic provided insights that purely academic researchers often missed. Priscilla's hands moved over the controls with practiced precision, making subtle adjustments that kept the process balanced on the knife's edge between success and catastrophic failure. This was why she was considered the peak of modern alchemy, not just her theoretical knowledge, but her intuitive understanding of how magical forces interacted at the fundamental level. 15% saturation achieved, Webb called out. All systems nominal. This is already beyond anything attempted before, I observed, noting the energy readings. The theoretical models suggested this level would be impossible to maintain. That's because they're trying to force the process? Priscilla replied without taking her eyes off her instruments. Magic isn't about domination. It's about harmony. You have to convince the forces to work together, not compel them. The apparatus hummed with increasing intensity as the process continued. The clear liquid in the central chamber began to glow with a soft blue light that gradually intensified. 25% saturation, Webb announced, his voice carrying growing excitement. Energy matrix holding stable. Crystalline resonance locked at optimal efficiency, another researcher added. We're approaching theoretical threshold. Priscilla's concentration was absolute. Her mid-immortal rank magical abilities fully engaged in maintaining the delicate balance of forces. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but her hands remained steady as she guided the process through uncharted territory. 30% saturation achieved, Webb called out, his voice now carrying genuine awe. This is beyond anything in the literature. The glow in the central chamber had become almost blindingly bright, but the energy readings remained stable. Whatever Priscilla had done differently, it was working beyond all expectations. 35%, Webb announced. Energy matrix stabilizing at maximum theoretical efficiency. The light in the chamber suddenly shifted, taking on a distinctive silver-blue hue that made my breath catch. I recognized that color from my studies of natural Aetheryte found in the deepest dungeon cores. The transformation was unmistakable. The liquid had become something fundamentally different. Process approaching completion, Priscilla announced, her voice tight with concentration and excitement. Initiating final stabilization sequence. The next few minutes felt like hours as the monitoring equipment tracked the final phase of the transformation. Every researcher in the lab held their breath, understanding that they were witnessing a moment that would change magical science forever. Finally, the apparatus powered down with a soft chime. The silver-blue glow in the central chamber settled into a steady, stable luminescence that indicated successful synthesis. Analysis complete, the computer announced in its neutral tone.
Stable étrie de suspension achevée.
Silence filled the lab as everyone processed what they had just witnessed. Then Priscilla straightened, turned to face the assembled team, and spoke the words that would echo through magical history. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice carrying quiet triumph. We have successfully created the first stable Aetheryte elixir in recorded history. Chapter 694. Amrita, 2. The communication channels immediately erupted with questions, demands for verification, and more than a few expressions of outright disbelief. Priscilla listened to the initial responses with obvious satisfaction before closing the connection and turning back to our small group. That felt good, she admitted with uncharacteristic candor. The Tower's research team has been so insufferably condescending in our joint meetings, acting as if the Creighton family were merely junior partners in this endeavor. Rachel laughed softly. Aunt Priscilla, you've been plotting this moment for months, haven't you? Plotting is such an ugly word, Priscilla replied with mock innocence. I prefer strategically positioning our achievements for maximum impact. She moved to the central chamber and carefully extracted the vial of transformed liquid, holding it up to the light. The silver-blue glow seemed to pulse with its own inner life, beautiful and somehow alive in a way that made my enhanced senses tingle with recognition. Priscilla finally turned to me, her sapphire eyes gleaming with a mix of pride and exhaustion. This, she said, holding up the vial like a trophy, is the world's first SSS rank elixir. Call it Amrita. Aetheryte has made it possible to break through the limitations of beast blood elixirs. This little wonder can heal even ascendant rankers. It's miraculous. I blinked, taken aback by the revelation. That's incredible, I murmured, the weight of her words settling over me. It's more than incredible, she said, her voice tinged with excitement as she turned the vial in her fingers. This is the pinnacle, the absolute limit of what Aetheryte can achieve in potions. Amrita isn't just a product. It's a declaration of the new era we're entering. What about other elixirs? I asked, curiosity sparking. Priscilla's grin widened, a rare flicker of raw enthusiasm breaking through her usual composed exterior. Oh, we've developed plenty. Lower-tier elixirs, potions for all ranks up to white, and everything in between. The best part? Aetheryte potions are not only superior in quality but also cheaper to produce. The old market doesn't stand a chance. My brow furrowed. Cheaper? Even with the current supply constraints. She nodded, her expression calculating. The amounts of Aetheryte required are minuscule. We're talking a fraction of what's used for artifacts or other applications. With just 1 vial's worth of raw material, we can produce dozens of potions. Once you expand the supply chain and establish more mining operations, the market for traditional beast blood elixirs will collapse under its own weight. And this isn't just about healing, she continued, leaning slightly closer as if sharing a secret. I've already tested preliminary formulas for energy recovery, mana augmentation, and even specialized potions tailored for specific elemental affinities. Aetheryte enhances everything. Potions to aid white rankers near integration. Too? I asked. Priscilla inclined her head. Naturally. These potions won't just be luxury items. They'll be essential tools for climbers and mages alike. Of course, they lose their efficacy beyond integration, but that still leaves us with an enormous customer base. The implications were staggering. The sheer reach of Aetheryte's potential was greater than even I had envisioned. It wasn't just a tool. It was a weapon. A weapon that could dismantle the old systems and build something entirely new in its place. And the supply? I asked, shifting my focus. Priscilla's grin dimmed slightly, replaced by a more serious expression. That's where you come in. Right now, the supply is manageable, but if demand grows at the rate I expect, we'll need more, much more. We need more deposits, better refining methods, and faster processing facilities. I nodded. I'm already working on expanding mining operations. Kalian is securing additional deposits on the moon, and the Creighton family has been instrumental in processing what we've extracted so far. But we'll need to scale up everything, logistics, transportation, storage, if we're going to keep up. Priscilla tilted her head, her gaze thoughtful. And what about the Tower of Magic? Are they still in play? For now, I said, but their involvement is temporary. The Creighton estate will take over as the primary hub for Aetheryte processing once the infrastructure is solid. I trust you more with this than I do them. Her lips twitched into a satisfied smile. Good, because once we fully dominate the potion market, we'll be ready to move into other industries, artifacts, transportation, even spell arrays. Aetheryte isn't just the future, Arthur. It's our future. I glanced back at the glowing vial in her hand, the light from Amrita reflecting in her eyes. For a moment, the weight of everything we were building seemed both overwhelming and exhilarating. Let's change the world, I said quietly. Priscilla's smile widened. Oh, we will. The warp gate chamber in the Tower of Magic hummed with barely contained energy as I materialized in Avalon City. The familiar sensation of dimensional travel was followed immediately by the oppressive weight of concentrated magical power that permeated every stone of the ancient structure. Even after years of visiting, the tower's sheer presence never failed to impress. A monument to magical knowledge that had stood for over 2 millennia. Arthur, a familiar voice called out as I stepped from the arrival platform. Master Aldrich Thorn approached with his characteristic brisk pace, his weathered face showing a mixture of pride and barely contained excitement. Despite being well into his 70s, he moved with the energy of someone decades younger, his integration rank power maintaining both his physical capabilities and his sharp intellect. Master Thorn. I greeted him with genuine warmth. I take it Priscilla's announcement has caused quite a stir? Stir. He laughed, the sound echoing off the chamber's crystalline walls. My boy. That announcement has turned the entire tower upside down. Half the research staff are demanding immediate access to Aetheryte samples, and the other half are frantically trying to verify her claims through theoretical models. We walked through the tower's corridors as he spoke, passing laboratories where I could see researchers hunched over complex calculations and experimental apparatus. The energy in the air was palpable, the excitement of a scientific community that had just witnessed what they thought was a paradigm shift. Right on schedule, I thought with satisfaction. Everything was proceeding exactly as I'd anticipated based on my knowledge of Aetheryte's capabilities. Charlotte wants to see you immediately, Master Thorn continued. She's been in emergency session with the Senior Research Council since Priscilla's broadcast. I've never seen the Tower Master so animated. That made sense. Charlotte Alaric was brilliant enough to immediately recognize the implications of Aetheryte's potential. Unlike the other researchers who were still trying to verify Priscilla's claims, she would have already moved past acceptance to implementation. We reached the Tower Master's chambers on the 97th floor, where the view of Avalon City spread out below us like a magical tapestry. Charlotte Alaric stood with her back to the door, her vibrant red hair cascading down her shoulders as she gazed out at the city. At only 31, she was the youngest Tower Master in the institution's history. Her low radiant rank power complemented by an intellect that had revolutionized several fields of magical study. Arthur, she said without turning around. Perfect timing. I was just contemplating how dramatically the magical landscape is about to change. Tower Master, I replied, noting the controlled excitement in her voice. Charlotte was clearly several steps ahead of her research staff in understanding what Aetheryte represented. She turned to face me, and I was struck by the intensity in her jade-green eyes. There was something there beyond mere excitement. A fierce competitive spirit that had been awakened by Priscilla's announcement, combined with the satisfaction of someone who had already formulated a response. That brilliant woman has thrown down quite the gauntlet, Charlotte said with a smile that was equal parts admiration and challenge. SSS rank healing elixirs, market disruption on a continental scale, and the most elegantly executed scientific coup I've witnessed in decades. She does have a flair for dramatic timing, I agreed, unsurprised by the tower's competitive response. This was exactly the kind of innovation race I'd been hoping to encourage. Indeed, but I didn't call you here simply to congratulate the Creighton family on their achievement. Charlotte moved to her desk, where several crystalline devices hummed with contained magical energy. The Tower of Magic has not been idle during these past weeks of collaboration. Here it comes, I thought, already anticipating what she was about to reveal. Artifact enhancement had always been one of Aetheryte's most obvious applications. Master Thorn's excitement became more pronounced. Arthur, what Charlotte is about to show you represents the next logical step in Aetheryte application. Charlotte activated one of the devices, and a holographic display materialized in the air between us. The image showed a complex magical schema, far more intricate than anything used in traditional artifact crafting, but exactly what I'd expected to see eventually. For decades, Charlotte began, her voice taking on the measured cadence of a master lecturer. Mass-produced magical artifacts have been limited to elite-grade potency at best. The materials, the crafting processes, the sheer complexity of integrating multiple magical systems and the addition of the essence of time, all of it created barriers that made mass production of historic-grade artifacts and above impossible. She gestured to the holographic schema, which rotated slowly to reveal its three-dimensional complexity. Aetheryte has eliminated that fundamental limitation. The stabilization properties? I asked, already knowing the answer but wanting to hear their specific approach. Exactly, Charlotte confirmed with obvious satisfaction. Aetheryte doesn't just enhance magical processes. It acts as a universal stabilizing agent for complex magical matrices. Enchantments that would normally interfere with each other can coexist peacefully when mediated through Aetheryte integration points. Master Thorn stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with the enthusiasm of someone witnessing what he thought was a breakthrough. We've successfully created the first mass-producible historic-grade artifacts. Weapons, armor, utility items, all of them surpassing anything previously possible for large-scale manufacturing. I nodded approvingly. This was the natural progression I'd been waiting for. The cost efficiency must be substantial. Beyond our most optimistic projections, Charlotte continued, clearly pleased by my lack of surprise at their achievement. She activated another display, showing cost comparisons that were impressive but not unexpected. We estimate a 70% reduction in material costs, combined with manufacturing processes that are 8 times faster than traditional methods. An elite-grade sword that currently sells for $15 million could be produced and sold profitably for $4 million. And that's just the beginning, I observed. As production scales and processes refine, those costs will drop further. Precisely, Charlotte agreed, her jade eyes sparkling with the satisfaction of someone whose theoretical projections were being validated. We project final costs dropping to under $2 million per elite-grade item within 2 years. That brings them within reach of major guilds, military organizations, and wealthy adventurers, a market exponentially larger than the current customer base. Master Thorn pulled up additional schematics. We've already completed prototypes for 17 different artifact categories. Combat gear, defensive equipment, utility items for mining and exploration, even luxury goods for the civilian market. The civilian applications were always going to be significant, I said, thinking about the broader economic implications. Communication devices, transportation artifacts, household utilities. The market potential is enormous. Charlotte's smile became almost predatory. Aetheryte-enhanced communication devices that can reach across continents. Transportation artifacts that reduce travel time by half. Household items that can maintain perfect temperature control or provide illumination that rivals natural sunlight. The applications are limited only by imagination and available Aetheryte supply. And there's the key constraint, I thought. Everything would ultimately come down to Aetheryte production capacity. The production timeline? I asked. 6 months for full-scale manufacturing capability, Charlotte replied confidently. We've already begun retrofitting our facilities and training our artificers in the new techniques. By year's end, the Tower of Magic will be producing historic-grade artifacts at a rate that would have been unthinkable just months ago. Which brings us to the critical issue, I said, getting to the heart of why they called this meeting. Master Thorn's expression grew more serious. Exactly. Arthur, this level of production will require guaranteed Aetheryte allocation. We need assurance of supply stability. Guaranteed etherite allocation for our manufacturing operations, Charlotte said immediately. Priority access during any supply shortages. And advance notice of any changes in availability or pricing. I considered their request carefully. This was the moment I'd been building toward, when the various applications of etherite would create natural demand pressure that would justify massive expansion of production. I can guarantee baseline allocation, I said finally, but priority access will depend on overall supply levels and competing demands. The potion market is going to be equally hungry for etherite. Which is why we propose coordinated market entry, Charlotte said. The tower focusing on artifacts, the Cretans dominating potions, and Ouroboros managing the supply chain. We avoid direct competition while maximizing market penetration. And, Master Thorn added with a grin, we get the opportunity to show Priscilla Creighton that the Tower of Magic is equally capable of revolutionary breakthroughs. Charlotte's laugh was rich with competitive satisfaction. It's time to make our own announcement. I believe the magical research community is ready for another paradigm shift. Looking between my former teacher and the Tower Master, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Everything was proceeding exactly as I'd envisioned. The race to reshape the world through etherite applications was accelerating, and all the major players were moving in directions that would ultimately benefit Ouroboros' position as the primary supplier. The future was unfolding precisely as planned. Chapter 695. Market Launch 1. In the heart of Avalon City, capital of the sprawling Slatemark Empire, a new landmark dominated the prestigious Guild District with gleaming authority. The Ouroboros commercial complex rose 12 stories into the sky, its sleek facade of black glass and silver accents reflecting the morning sun like a monument to ambition. Guild expansions weren't uncommon in Avalon. The city thrived as the nexus of power and commerce, where successful organizations routinely evolved into sprawling commercial enterprises that drove the empire's economic engine. But this particular complex was different. The difference wasn't in its architecture, impressive though it was, nor in its prime location among the city's most exclusive addresses. The difference lay in what was happening around it today, the first public launch of etherite-enhanced products to the continental market. Outside, a procession of luxury vehicles stretched for 3 city blocks, their polished exteriors gleaming under the autumn sun. Sleek sports cars bearing noble license plates sat alongside armored limousines owned by merchant princes and guild leaders. A pristine white luxury car with gold trim was parked next to a matte black car that probably cost more than most people's houses. This wasn't the usual trickle of affluent customers that even successful guilds might attract. This was an inundation, a flood of Avalon's social and economic elite converging on the complex with the urgency of pilgrims to a shrine. The air itself seemed to vibrate with anticipation, crackling with the kind of nervous energy that preceded momentous occasions. Whispers had been circulating through the city's exclusive clubs and penthouses for weeks, spreading through the boardrooms of corporate empires and the private lounges of guild headquarters like wildfire. Whispers of something unprecedented, something that promised to reshape the very foundations of magical commerce. Lady Catherine Ravencrest, no relation to Queen Isolde, despite the shared name, stepped from her crimson car with practiced elegance, her emerald silk dress complementing the car's luxurious interior. As one of the Empire's wealthiest socialites and a discerning collector of rare magical items, her presence here carried significant weight. Where Lady Catherine shopped, others followed. The crowds are remarkable, observed her companion, Lord Marcus Aldridge, emerging from the passenger side. The silver-haired gentleman's merchant empire supplied luxury goods across 3 continents, and his custom Bentley was parked just behind them. I haven't seen this level of excitement since the first prince announced his potential engagement. Excitement and skepticism in equal measure, Lady Catherine replied, noting the mixture of anticipation and wariness in the faces around them as valets directed traffic and managed the controlled chaos of Avalon's elite arriving simultaneously. Half these people are here to witness history, and the other half are here to witness what they expect will be an expensive failure. Inside the complex, the scene bordered on surreal. The grand atrium soared 5 stories overhead, its glass dome casting natural light across polished marble floors inlaid with precious metals. The space had been designed to impress, but today it served a different purpose, to showcase a revolution. Display cases lined the walls like altars to innovation, each one housing products that challenged everything the magical community thought they knew about enhancement potions and artifacts. Digital screens provided detailed specifications and certification documents, while climate-controlled environments maintained optimal storage conditions. The lighting was perfect, the arrangement immaculate, but it was the crowds that made the scene extraordinary. Men and women of unimaginable wealth pressed against the displays with the eager curiosity of children in a toy shop, their usual dignified composure abandoned in the face of genuine wonder. Lady Catherine approached the first display case, her expert eye immediately drawn to a collection of healing potions arranged like precious gems. She lifted one, a sleek vial filled with liquid that shimmered with internal light, its surface shifting between silver and blue like captured starlight. Her gaze drifted to the digital price display, and her perfectly manicured hand flew to her mouth. "Impossible," she breathed, her voice barely audible above the murmur of conversations around her. Lord Marcus noticed her reaction immediately. "What is it, Catherine? You look as though you've seen a ghost." This healing potion, she said, holding the vial up to catch the light, is priced at $3 million. That seems reasonable for an A-rank healing elixir, Marcus replied, though his business-trained mind was already calculating implications. Marcus, Catherine said slowly, her voice trembling with disbelief. I purchased an A-rank healing potion last week for $6 million, and from the luminescence patterns alone, I can tell this one is significantly more potent. Marcus took the vial from her hands, examining it with the practiced eye of someone who had dealt in rare magical goods for decades. The internal energy was unmistakable. This wasn't just an A-rank potion. The stability of the enhancement matrix, the purity of the magical resonance, the sustained luminescence that indicated long-term potency, all of it suggested something approaching S-rank quality. That's impossible, he murmured, though his voice lacked conviction. S-rank healing potions cost over $20 million, when they're available at all. Are you suggesting this etherite substance can produce equivalent results for a fraction of the cost? Around them, similar conversations erupted like small explosions of disbelief. A cluster of noble ladies examined enhancement elixirs with expressions of mingled wonder and suspicion, their designer handbags and jewelry catching the atrium's carefully managed lighting. A group of businessmen huddled around a display of utility artifacts, their urgent whispers punctuated by occasional exclamations of amazement or skepticism as they checked the specifications on their smartphones and tablets. This changes everything, one woman declared, her voice carrying across the atrium as she photographed a price display with her phone. If these claims are accurate, the entire enhancement industry will collapse overnight. Or adapt, corrected her companion, a shrewd-eyed gentleman whose fortune came from potion distribution and who was already mentally calculating supply chain implications. Those who embrace this technology will thrive. Those who don't. He didn't need to finish the sentence. The implications hung in the air like storm clouds. A guild representative approached Lady Catherine with practiced professional courtesy, his smile confident but not presumptuous. He wore the dark blue business suit standard for Guild Ouroboros senior staff, with a silver pin bearing the guild's serpentine logo. Lady Catherine, he said with a respectful nod. I'm Senior Sales Director Thomas Blackwood. I understand you have questions about our Etherite products. Questions? Catherine laughed, though there was no humor in it. Mr. Blackwood, I have accusations. You're claiming to sell S-rank quality healing potions for A-rank prices. That's either fraud or miracle working, and I'm not sure which prospect is more disturbing. I assure you, my lady, every product in this establishment has undergone rigorous testing by independent magical authorities. Blackwood replied smoothly, gesturing to the certification documents displayed on nearby screens. The Imperial Standards Bureau has certified our quality claims, and we offer a full money-back guarantee on all purchases. The Imperial Bureau? Marcus interjected, his eyebrows rising as he pulled out his phone to verify the claims. They certified S-rank potency at A-rank pricing? Not just certified, Blackwood confirmed with obvious satisfaction. Bureau Chief Aldwin personally oversaw the testing process. The results exceeded even our own projections. You can access the full certification reports through the QR codes next to each display. The mention of Bureau Chief Aldwin sent ripples through the nearby crowd. The man was renowned for his conservative approach to magical certification, famous for rejecting products that claimed even modest improvements over existing standards. If he had personally certified Etherite products, how is this possible? Lady Catherine asked, her business instincts warring with her incredulity. What makes Etherite so revolutionary? The technical details are proprietary, Blackwood admitted, but I can tell you that Etherite serves as a universal enhancement catalyst. It doesn't just improve potency. It stabilizes the enhancement process, reduces material waste, and allows for effects that were previously impossible to achieve reliably. He gestured toward another display case. For example, that regeneration elixir Amrita can regrow severed limbs in ascendant rank individuals. Previously, such healing required either supremely skilled healers or artifacts worth tens of billions of dollars. Now it's available for under $1 billion. The crowd around them had grown larger, drawn by the conversation and the obvious expertise of both the representative and the customers. Word was spreading through the atrium via social media and text messages that Lady Catherine, whose collection was legendary among the Empire's elite, was seriously considering purchases. The long-term implications, Marcus mused aloud while scrolling through certification documents on his tablet. If these products can be mass-produced at these quality levels and price points, the entire magical economy will restructure itself, Catherine finished. Traditional enhancement providers will be unable to compete. Guild hierarchies will shift based on access to Etherite. Even individual adventurer capabilities will be revolutionized when S-rank enhancement becomes economically accessible. The weight of what they were witnessing began to settle over the assembled crowd. This wasn't just a product launch. It was the opening shot in an economic revolution that would reshape magical society. Lady Catherine finally placed the healing potion back in its display case, though her fingers lingered on the vial as if reluctant to let go. Around her, other customers were making similar calculations, their faces cycling through disbelief, excitement, and grim acceptance of inevitable change. You're going to buy it, aren't you? Marcus asked, reading her expression with the familiarity of old friendship. Catherine hesitated for only a moment before nodding decisively. Not just one, she said, her voice tinged with the excitement of someone witnessing history. I'm going to buy enough to last through whatever chaos this creates in the traditional markets. She gestured to the sales director. Mr. Blackwood, I'd like to discuss bulk purchasing arrangements. As she spoke, similar conversations were erupting throughout the atrium. The initial skepticism was giving way to recognition, and with recognition came the urgent need to adapt quickly to a fundamentally changed landscape. Outside the complex, the line of luxury vehicles continued to grow as word spread through Avalon's financial districts via news feeds and social media. This was more than a successful product launch. It was the dawn of a new era in magical commerce. And everyone present understood they were witnessing the moment when the world began to change forever. Chapter 696. Market Launch 2. This is absurd, Callie murmured, her dark eyes scanning the holographic displays before her. A disbelieving smile tugged at the corners of her lips, equal parts incredulity and satisfaction. The numbers flickered and danced like an exuberant chorus line, each figure more staggering than the last. The revenue reports of Ouroboros, reflecting their Aetheryte domination across all 5 continents, painted a picture of unparalleled success. In just a few months, they had achieved the impossible, total market dominance. Callie leaned back, a hand brushing through her hair as she exhaled sharply. I knew we'd win, she muttered to herself. But it had been an expected outcome, at least on paper. Aetheryte was cheaper, better, and backed by powerful allies. Their supply chain was airtight, their logistics seamless. The 12 great guilds, despite their entrenched control of the market, were outmatched by sheer innovation. And yet, knowing it and seeing it were 2 very different experiences. Ouroboros had claimed nearly $5 trillion in revenue this quarter alone. It wasn't just money. It was a tidal wave, a flood, sweeping over every established institution in its path. The 12 great guilds, collectively titans in their fields, had reported a combined $10 trillion this quarter. Ouroboros had managed half their earnings, despite being a relative newcomer. This is madness, Callie said aloud, though no one was there to hear her. She placed a hand on the edge of the display, steadying herself as the holograms shifted to showcase Ouroboros' rising stock price. The world, it seemed, was betting on Arthur Nightingale's audacity. Her thoughts strayed to the intricacies of the 12 great guilds' downfall. The guilds were confined to the central continent, thanks to imperial sanctions imposed by successive slate-mark emperors who sought to maintain control. Ouroboros, by contrast, had taken advantage of its multi-continental reach. Through shrewd connections, relentless paperwork, and well-placed bribes, they had bypassed the bureaucratic labyrinth that stifled others. Now they reaped the rewards, raking in profit while the 12 great guilds languished under the weight of their own inertia. Still, Callie couldn't help but feel the faintest pang of disbelief, and something more. The 12 great guilds, for all their vaunted might, had done nothing. At least not yet. Her brow furrowed as unease began to settle in the pit of her stomach. Why haven't they moved yet? She wondered aloud, pacing the room. Her footsteps echoed against the polished floor as she chewed over the question like a stubborn piece of gristle. It didn't add up. The 12 great guilds were behemoths, their influence so deeply entrenched that even governments dared not challenge them lightly. The first quarter had passed with little more than a murmur of resistance. It was as if the storm had held its breath. But storms didn't vanish. They gathered. They swirled and loomed, biding their time before the deluge. A flicker of memory distracted her. Arthur's calm, confident voice as he mapped out their strategy in meticulous detail. He'd seen this coming, of course. He always did. But even Arthur couldn't predict everything. Callie's thoughts darkened as she considered the inevitable. The 12 great guilds wouldn't remain idle. They were juggernauts, masters of consolidation and control. They would not go quietly into obscurity. No, their response would be swift, ruthless, and overwhelming. They would use every tool in their arsenal: diplomacy, propaganda, sabotage. If Ouroboros had stormed the gates, the 12 great guilds would retaliate with battering rams of their own. Her grip tightened on the edge of the desk. They'll try to stifle us, she said softly, the words bitter in her mouth. They'll cut us off from the Slate-mark Empire's markets. Maybe even try to break us apart entirely. Her gaze drifted back to the displays, where glowing numbers mocked the quiet dread taking root in her chest. She was rich now, unfathomably so. For the first time in her life, she held a fortune that dwarfed even her family's wealth. And yet, the euphoria of success was tempered by the cold knowledge of what lay ahead. For a moment, her mind wandered to the mana oath that had bound her to Arthur. Back then, she chafed at the obligation, resented the leash around her neck. Now she saw it differently. I was beginning to feel bad for the mana oath, she thought, a wry smile tugging at her lips. But Arthur made it work, didn't he? The man was maddeningly capable, his plans unfolding with a precision that bordered on the divine. But even he wasn't invincible. Callie could feel the weight of the world pressing down on Ouroboros. And somewhere, beyond the glow of the holograms and the walls of this room, the 12 great guilds were stirring. She could almost feel their collective gaze, cold and calculating, as they began to turn their attention toward Ouroboros. Let them come, she muttered, her jaw tightening as resolve hardened in her chest. We're ready. But were they? The question hovered in the air, weighty and unspoken, as Callie turned her gaze back to the glowing displays. The numbers marched steadily upward, relentless as the tide. Each digit seemed to whisper promises of triumph, shadowed by murmurs of impending conflict. Are you worried? Jin's voice broke through her thoughts, sharp but not unkind. She glanced at him, her expression unguarded. Yes, she admitted, her words heavier than she intended. The 12 great guilds aren't weak. They're entrenched, powerful, resilient. Jin nodded, his face impassive, though his amber eyes betrayed a flicker of understanding. They will move soon. When they do, they won't play fair, and they won't hesitate to use force, coercion, sabotage, you name it. They'll hit us where it hurts. Callie crossed her arms, her sharp gaze flickering between the data and the man before her. What should we do then? Wait for their move and react? Or start dismantling them before they even draw their swords? Jin allowed himself the briefest smile, a touch of dry humor edging his voice. Trust Arthur, he said simply. Arthur will lead us to glory. She blinked at him, momentarily startled. You believe in him that much now? There was no mockery in her tone, just genuine surprise. This was Jin Ashbluff, a prince of the Western continent, a man who had been forced into service through a mana oath. Trusting Arthur wasn't in the script. But Jin's reply came without hesitation. I do, he said firmly. I trust his competence, his vision, and his drive. He doesn't just want to win. He wants to rewrite the rules of the game. And he's already doing it. Within a year, Ouroboros will stand above the 12 great guilds completely. Callie leaned against the table, her brow furrowed. That's ambitious, even for him. But we need more than just money and market domination, Jin. You know that. The 12 great guilds are more than just businesses. They're pillars of power, wielding influence that stretches into the Slatemark Empire's politics. Its military, its very fabric. Arthur knows, Jin replied, his voice low but steady, like the calm before a storm. And he'll do more than dominate the market. He'll crush the 12 great guilds. Not just beat them, but force them to kneel, to submit. The conviction in his voice startled her. This wasn't the man who had begrudgingly followed Arthur's orders in the early days. This was someone who believed, not out of obligation but out of experience. Callie sighed, running a hand through her hair. That's a lot of faith to place in one man, even Arthur. Jin tilted his head, a faint smirk playing at the edges of his lips. He's earned it. You've seen it yourself, Callie. Every time the odds are stacked against him, he doesn't just survive. He thrives. This isn't about faith. It's about fact. She looked back at the displays, at the numbers that now felt less like a triumph and more like a warning. I hope you're right, she murmured. Because if you're wrong. Jin cut her off, his voice sharp as a blade. I'm not wrong, and you know it. The only question is how far he'll go. And I, for one, am eager to find out. The room fell into a tense silence, filled with the hum of holographic screens and the distant echo of footsteps in the sprawling Ouroboros headquarters. Callie didn't reply, but the spark of determination in Jin's words lingered, settling in her mind like a seed. Arthur Nightingale had set the world on fire, and now, it seemed, he was determined to reshape the ashes into something no one had ever seen before, whether they liked it or not. Chapter 697. Market Launch 3. The private meeting room in the Imperial Palace was a study in understated opulence. Rich mahogany paneling, burgundy velvet drapes, and the subtle aura of power that came with centuries of political decisions. Reika trailed silently behind me, her presence as sharp and composed as ever, though I caught the slight tension in her posture that indicated her readiness for anything. My eyes settled on the woman seated across from the polished conference table, and I inclined my head in a respectful bow. I greet the Chancellor of the Slatemark Empire, Lady Amelia. Amelia von Vexus was a woman who could command a room with nothing more than the quiet assurance in her amber eyes. Her violet hair, a shade so striking it seemed almost otherworldly, cascaded down her back in effortless waves. Though she remained seated, her presence alone made the air feel heavier, charged with the authority of someone who held the Empire's fate in her hands. Guildmaster Arthur, she said, her smile as precise as her reputation for political acumen. She gestured gracefully to the leather chair opposite her, her perfectly manicured nails tapping a measured rhythm against her porcelain teacup. Please have a seat. I settled into the chair with deliberate calm while Reika positioned herself behind me, a silent guardian. Amelia's gaze lingered, assessing me with the calculating look of someone who had risen to become the youngest chancellor in the Empire's history. Fifth in power only to the Emperor himself and the highest-ranking nobles, she was not someone to underestimate. I hear Ouroboros is making quite the impression, she remarked, her voice carrying the deceptive serenity of still water concealing dangerous depths. Indeed, I replied simply, meeting her amber gaze without flinching. Which brings me to why I requested this meeting. I'm proposing exclusive military contracts with the Imperial family, for the Army, Navy, and Air Force. I want the Empire's military to adopt Aetheryte across all branches, supplied exclusively by Ouroboros. She raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, her teacup pausing midway to her lips. You ask for the impossible. I remained silent, allowing her the space to elaborate. Her expression didn't waver as she set the cup down with an almost imperceptible clink. Our military is bound by comprehensive contracts with Ferroclism Corporation for the development and supply of military technology, she explained, her tone maintaining its careful neutrality. Additionally, the Tower of Magic oversees significant portions of our strategic research initiatives. These agreements are deeply entrenched in our budget and bureaucratic framework. Breaking them would cost trillions in penalty fees. And yet, I said, leaning forward slightly, I'm asking you to do precisely that. Her amber eyes flickered with genuine surprise, though her composure remained intact. You want me to authorize diverting a substantial portion of the military budget to cover penalties of that magnitude? Not exactly, I replied, allowing a slight smile. The contracts with Ferroclism grant them exclusive rights to supply all existing categories of military technology. But Aetheryte isn't about making conventional weapons marginally better, it's about creating an entirely new generation of military capabilities. Revolutionary advancement, not incremental improvement. Your existing contracts don't account for technologies that didn't exist when they were signed. Her lips parted slightly as she processed my words. A contractual loophole, she said slowly, her legal mind immediately grasping the implications. Aetheryte doesn't merely enhance existing technology. It fundamentally redefines what's possible. The contracts remain technically intact, but their practical relevance becomes limited. Precisely, I confirmed. Once you witness what Aetheryte can achieve in military applications, Ferroclism's conventional offerings will appear antiquated by comparison. When that inevitability becomes apparent, you'll have every justification to replace them with Ouroboros. She studied me intently, her analytical gaze probing for weaknesses or deception. And you also want the Empire's guarantee against economic sanctions from other major powers? Yes, I replied without hesitation. With Imperial backing, we can stabilize our rapid expansion while accelerating the Empire's strategic advantages. It's mutually beneficial. Amelia's smile returned, sharp as a blade hidden beneath silk. And why should I risk the Empire's established relationships for an unproven technology? In response, I withdrew an envelope from my jacket and slid it across the polished table. Her elegant fingers retrieved it, breaking the wax seal with fluid precision. Her expression remained carefully neutral as she scanned the contents. But I didn't miss the subtle widening of her eyes or the slight tightening of her grip on the parchment. When she finally set the document down, she fixed me with a look that balanced amusement and disbelief in equal measure. You are either a visionary or completely insane, Arthur Nightingale. Perhaps both, I admitted, settling back in my chair with quiet confidence. But it's calculated audacity. Her gaze held mine for several heartbeats before she exhaled, the tension around her shoulders easing fractionally. Even so, I'll need comprehensive documentation before presenting this to the Minister of Defense. Politics at this level is played on a knife's edge, Guildmaster, and I don't play to lose. Neither do I replied, my voice carrying absolute conviction. I'll have detailed contracts and technical specifications delivered within the hour. Amelia gave a single, measured nod. Excellent. Then let us discover whether your Aetheryte can truly live up to its extraordinary promises. The meeting concluded with polite but meaningful exchanges, and as Reika and I stepped into the crisp afternoon air of the Imperial complex, I felt the weight of what had just transpired. This wasn't merely another business negotiation. This was the opening move in a campaign that would reshape the continental balance of power. In this game, failure was not an option. After Arthur and Reika departed, the meeting room settled into profound silence. Amelia von Vexus remained seated, her amber eyes fixed on the document Arthur had presented. A subtle smile curved her lips as her fingers traced the paper's edge, as though it contained secrets meant only for her understanding. Calculated audacity, she murmured to herself, the words carrying more admiration than skepticism. History had taught her that the line between revolutionary genius and dangerous madness was often razor-thin. Those bold enough to challenge established order rarely received immediate acclaim. They faced resistance, suspicion, and accusations of lunacy. But history, Amelia knew, consistently favored those with sufficient courage to act decisively. Drawing a measured breath, she retrieved her encrypted smartphone from the desk drawer. The screen's glow illuminated her face as she navigated to her priority contacts, her finger hovering momentarily before selecting the Minister of Defense. The connection established with a discreet chime, and a gruff voice answered immediately. Chancellor, the minister said, his tone respectful yet curious. Calls from Amelia were never trivial, and he understood better than to waste her time with unnecessary pleasantries. Minister, she began, her voice smooth and deliberate. I need to discuss a matter of critical strategic importance. It concerns the future structure of our military procurement contracts. A pause followed, then a thoughtful hum. Continue. Amelia's smile widened as she leaned forward slightly, her conviction evident even through the digital connection. Ouroboros has presented a comprehensive proposition. Etherite, the revolutionary substance they've introduced to civilian markets, represents technological advancement unlike anything our analysts have encountered. They're proposing exclusive contracts for military applications across all service branches. The minister's voice sharpened with concern. You're suggesting we replace Ferroclism Corporation? Do you understand the magnitude of what you're proposing? Completely, Amelia replied with unwavering confidence. And so does Arthur Nightingale. The terms he's offered exploit a significant loophole in our existing agreements. Etherite applications don't represent enhancement of current technology. They constitute an entirely new technological paradigm. Legally, we can proceed without triggering penalty clauses. The minister exhaled heavily, skepticism evident. You expect me to stake our national security on promises from a single guild? Amelia allowed a strategic pause, her eyes narrowing as she selected her words carefully. Ouroboros isn't merely another guild organization. They've captured substantial global market share within months of product launch. Their offerings are superior in quality, more cost-effective, and supported by supply infrastructure that rivals our largest defense contractors. Arthur's foresight in establishing independent supply chains has left traditional suppliers struggling to respond. What happens when Ferroclism retaliates? The minister pressed. They will attempt retaliation, Amelia acknowledged matter-of-factly. But this transcends simple contract disputes. This represents positioning the Slatemark Empire at the forefront of a technological revolution. Ferroclism has grown complacent through monopolistic practices. Ouroboros, conversely, possesses the hunger that breeds true innovation. Silence stretched across the connection as the minister processed her arguments. Forward me the complete documentation, he said finally. If the contracts are legally sound and the technology proves viable, we'll proceed with implementation. Amelia's smile returned, satisfaction gleaming in her amber eyes. You'll have everything on your desk before sunset. The call ended with a soft click, and Amelia placed her phone aside with practiced grace. She returned her attention to Arthur's proposal. The details of his audacious plans spread before her like a strategic map of an uncharted future. Ferroclism won't know what hit them, she said quietly, her voice mixing admiration with anticipation. Rising from her chair, she moved to the expansive window overlooking the imperial capital. The city stretched endlessly before her, and she could already see signs of Etherite's influence beginning to reshape commerce and industry. The outlines of a new era were emerging through cracks in the established order. Chapter 698. Southern Continent, 1. Master, is this not dangerous? Reka asked, her violet eyes reflecting concern as she gazed out the window of our private jet. Below us, the azure waters of the great southern sea stretched endlessly toward the horizon, marking our approach to the continent of powerful bloodlines and ancient beasts. What makes you think it's dangerous? I replied, one hand absently stroking Luna's dark hair as she slept peacefully across my lap. Ferroclism is strong, Reka pressed, her voice carrying the weight of professional assessment. In terms of pure combat power, they stand at the helm of all the diamond rank guilds. Their military connections run deeper than just contracts. They have personal relationships with generals, admirals, and commanders across the empire. I nodded, acknowledging her valid concerns. You're absolutely right. They are formidable opponents with incredible resources. Then why? Reka? I interrupted gently, shifting slightly to face her while being careful not to disturb Luna. When you go fishing, what's the most important element? She tilted her head, considering my question. The bait. Exactly. And what makes good bait effective? It has to be appealing enough to attract the target, but not so obvious that they recognize the trap, she said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn in her eyes. Ferroclism is strong, and they know it. That strength breeds confidence, justified confidence in many cases. But confidence can become arrogance, and arrogance makes even the most powerful opponents predictable. I smiled, feeling the familiar satisfaction of a plan falling into place. They'll be wary, certainly. They'll take precautions. But they won't be careful enough, because their strength has always been sufficient before. Reka studied my expression for a long moment. You want them to attack. I want them to reveal their true nature in a way that can't be denied or spun by their public relations teams. Sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy isn't to outfight them. It's to let them defeat themselves. Luna stirred in my lap, mumbling something about butterflies before settling back into peaceful sleep. The sight of her innocent contentment made my chest warm with protective affection. I'm surprised Luna insisted on coming, Reka observed, reaching over to gently poke Luna's soft cheek with a small smile. She seemed so excited about this trip. I felt terrible about being so busy during the Etherite Arvadi phase and market launch, I admitted. Between the laboratory visits, political meetings, and strategic planning, I barely spent any quality time with her. She deserves better from her father. The guilt had been gnawing at me for weeks. Luna had been remarkably understanding about my absence, never complaining when I missed bedtime stories or had to cancel promised activities. But I'd seen the disappointment in her dark eyes when I had to leave for yet another urgent meeting, and it had cut deeper than any enemy's blade. So when I realized this southern continent trip would take several days, I decided we could combine business with family time. The Vizirian royal family understands the importance of family bonds. They'll appreciate that I brought Luna along. And the sightseeing? Reika asked with amusement. The southern continent has some of the most beautiful natural wonders on the planet. Luna should see them while she's still young enough to experience that sense of wonder. I looked down at my sleeping daughter. Besides, after everything she's been through, she deserves to make some happy memories. The jet began its descent toward Drakmor City, the southern continent's second-largest metropolitan area and a major hub for international commerce. Unlike the beast-tamer capital of Valdris where I'd visited during my academy field trip, Drakmor was known for its stunning architecture and cultural attractions, perfect for sightseeing with an 8-year-old. Master, Reika said quietly. The other girls wanted to come too, didn't they? I groaned softly. That was a diplomatic crisis that nearly derailed the entire trip. Cecilia pulled out every argument from royal diplomatic necessity to I haven't seen the southern continent's famous gardens. Rose insisted her business expertise was essential for negotiations. Rachel claimed the southern continent's religious sites required Sanctus-level inspection. Even Serafina submitted a formal request citing cultural exchange opportunities between Mount Hua and the Beast Kingdoms. How did you manage to convince them to stay behind? Barely. I had to promise individual trips to each of their preferred destinations once the Ferroclism situation was resolved. Cecilia gets a full royal visit to the Sunset Archipelago. Rose gets to negotiate trade agreements with the Eastern merchant princes. Rachel gets her pilgrimage to the northern continent's sacred sites. And Serafina. I paused, remembering her particular request. She wants to visit the ancient libraries of the Western academies. Reika laughed softly. You're going to be traveling for months fulfilling those promises. Worth it for some peaceful family time now, I replied, though I was already mentally calculating the logistics of 4 separate romantic getaways while managing guild operations and political maneuvering. The jet touched down smoothly at Drakmor International Airport, the city skyline rising beyond the terminal windows like something from a fantasy novel. Crystalline spires twisted skyward alongside more conventional skyscrapers, while floating gardens drifted lazily between the buildings on magical currents. Luna woke as we taxied to the gate, her eyes widening with wonder as she took in the alien beauty of the southern continent's architecture. Daddy, the buildings are flying, she exclaimed, pressing her face against the window. Those are the famous sky gardens of Drakmor, I explained, enjoying her excitement. They've been floating there for over 300 years, tended by wind magic specialists who maintain perfect growing conditions. Can we visit them? That's first on our sightseeing list, I promised, earning a brilliant smile that made every difficult negotiation ahead seem worthwhile. Our first day in Drakmor passed in a blur of wonder and discovery. We visited the sky gardens, where Luna marveled at flowers that bloomed in impossible colors and butterflies whose wings shimmered with natural magic. The crystal caverns beneath the city showcased geological formations that sang when touched by ambient mana, creating natural symphonies that left Luna speechless with awe. Reika proved to be an excellent companion for family outings, her usual serious demeanor softening as she watched Luna's joy. She even bought Luna a small dragon plushie from one of the souvenir shops, claiming it was for tactical comfort during future missions. We had dinner at a restaurant built into the trunk of a massive tree, its dining rooms connected by bridges that swayed gently in the evening breeze. Luna fell asleep against my shoulder during the meal, exhausted by excitement and wonder. She's happy, Reika observed as I carefully adjusted Luna's position without waking her. She is, and so am I. The simple truth of that statement surprised me. Despite the political machinations and strategic planning that constantly occupied my thoughts, these moments of pure family contentment felt more valuable than any business victory. Our second day was planned around the city's famous beast gardens, where visitors could safely observe some of the southern continent's more docile magical creatures. Luna was particularly enchanted by a family of miniature dragons who performed aerial acrobatics for treats. It was as we were leaving the gardens, Luna's hands secure in mine and Reika walking beside us with characteristic vigilance, that I saw her. Serafina Zenith stood beneath the garden's entrance archway like something from an elven fairy tale. Her silver hair caught the afternoon sunlight and seemed to glow with its own inner radiance, while her ice-blue eyes held depths that spoke of ancient magic and patient wisdom. She wore a flowing dress of pale blue that seemed to shift color with her movements, and her ethereal beauty made passers-by stop and stare in unconscious reverence. The half-elven princess of Mount Hua, one of the most reserved and enigmatic women I'd ever known, was the last person I'd expected to encounter on the southern continent. Serafina, I said, my voice carrying genuine shock. What are you doing here? Her lips curved in the faintest suggestion of a smile, an expression that on her normally composed features seemed almost revolutionary. When she spoke, her voice carried the musical quality of mountain winds through pines. I came for you, Arthur. Chapter 699. Southern Continent. 2. The moment of stunned silence stretched between us before Serafina's attention shifted to Luna, her ice-blue eyes softening with genuine warmth. Without hesitation, she gracefully knelt down to Luna's eye level and reached out to gently poke my daughter's cheek with one delicate finger. Hello again, little one, Serafina said, her usually reserved voice taking on an almost musical quality. You've grown even more adorable since our last meeting. Luna's face lit up with recognition and delight. Princess Seraphina, you came to see us. Indeed I did, Seraphina confirmed, her lips curving into one of her rare, genuine smiles. And I brought many gifts for you from my travels through the Eastern continent. Beautiful things I thought a precious girl like you might enjoy. Really? Luna's eyes widened with excitement, bouncing slightly on her toes. What kind of gifts? That, Seraphina said with mysterious elegance, will be a surprise for later. She straightened with fluid grace and, before I could fully process what was happening, slipped her arm through mine with the kind of natural familiarity that spoke of deep comfort between us. The gesture was subtle but unmistakably intimate, and I felt the familiar warmth that always accompanied Seraphina's presence. Arthur, she said, her voice returning to its characteristic measured cadence. If you require assistance with your business endeavors here, I am at your disposal. Mount Hua maintains excellent relationships with the southern continent's ruling families. I couldn't help but smile at her offer, feeling a rush of genuine happiness at her unexpected presence. Despite the complexity it would add to my carefully planned trip, seeing Seraphina again after weeks of separation felt like a missing piece clicking into place. I'm always grateful for your support, I replied, covering her hand on my arm with my own. Though I have to admit, I'm curious about what brought you all the way to the southern continent. Business with the eastern trade routes, she said with characteristic precision, though I caught the slight warmth in her eyes that suggested there was more to the story. It seemed efficient to coordinate my travel with yours. Reika observed our interaction with professional interest, though I noticed the slight relaxation in her posture that indicated she viewed Seraphina as an ally rather than a threat. Luna, meanwhile, had moved to Seraphina's other side and was chattering excitedly about all the things we'd seen in Drakmor. Can Princess Seraphina come with us to see more places? Luna asked, looking up at me with hopeful eyes. If she has time in her schedule, I replied, glancing at Seraphina questioningly. I believe I can make time, she said with that subtle smile that transformed her entire demeanor from ethereal princess to something more approachably beautiful. The rest of our afternoon took on a completely different character with Seraphina's addition to our group. We visited the famous Whispering Fountains, where water danced through the air in impossible patterns guided by magic. Seraphina's knowledge of magical theory added depth to Luna's wonder, as she explained how the fountains used emotional resonance to create their displays. At the Sunset Observatory, we watched as the afternoon light transformed the city's crystal spires into a symphony of colors. Luna sat on my shoulders to get a better view while Seraphina stood close enough that her silver hair occasionally brushed against my arm in the gentle breeze. It's beautiful, Luna declared as the light show reached its peak intensity. Indeed, Seraphina agreed, though when I glanced at her, I found her ice-blue eyes focused on me rather than the spectacular display. As evening approached, we made our way back to the Grand Drakmor Hotel, one of the continent's most luxurious establishments. The building itself was a masterpiece of southern architecture, with living wood forming elegant curves and spirals that housed guests in perfect harmony with nature. Our penthouse suite offered panoramic views of the city, but Seraphina's attention was focused on the collection of wrapped packages she began retrieving from her spatial storage. Each gift was wrapped in silk and tied with ribbons that seemed to shimmer with their own inner light. These are for you, Luna, Seraphina said, arranging the presents on the suite's main table. I thought of you often during my travels and couldn't resist acquiring things that reminded me of a certain clever little girl. Luna's excitement was infectious as she carefully unwrapped each gift. There was a music box that played melodies while tiny mechanical butterflies danced within a crystal dome. A set of art supplies that included brushes made from brilliant red feathers and paints that shimmered with natural magic. A collection of storybooks written in beautiful calligraphy, each one bound in leather that felt impossibly soft to the touch. But it was the final gift that made Luna gasp with pure delight. A delicate necklace featuring a pendant shaped like a butterfly, crafted from what appeared to be crystallized moonlight. It will glow softly when you're happy, Seraphina explained as she fastened the necklace around Luna's neck, and provide protection from nightmares while you sleep. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, Luna whispered, touching the pendant with reverent fingers. Thank you, Princess Seraphina. You are very welcome, little butterfly, Seraphina replied, her voice unusually gentle. As Luna busied herself with arranging her new treasures, Reika caught my eye and nodded toward the suite's secondary seating area. I'll help Luna organize her gifts, Reika said diplomatically. Master, perhaps you and Princess Seraphina would like to catch up on the balcony? I shot Reika a grateful look as Seraphina and I stepped out onto the balcony that overlooked Drakmor's evening skyline. The floating gardens were particularly beautiful at this hour, their magical luminescence creating a constellation of gentle lights against the darkening sky. I really missed you, Arthur, Seraphina said quietly, her usual composed facade softening as we stood together. The admission carried weight because it came from someone who rarely expressed personal emotions so directly. I missed you too, I replied honestly, reaching out to take her hand. More than I expected to. She was quiet for a moment, her ice-blue eyes reflecting the city lights below. You have many girls who care for you, she said finally, her voice carrying a note of something that might have been vulnerability. Cecilia, Rose, Rachel, Reika, you're surrounded by people who love you. Seraphina. But I only have you, she continued, turning to face me fully. Perhaps that makes me selfish, but I wanted you to know that my feelings haven't changed despite the complications in your life. The honesty in her voice, coming from someone so usually reserved, hit me harder than any dramatic declaration could have. Serafina's love wasn't demanding or possessive. It was simply there, constant and patient as mountain stone. You're not selfish, I said, stepping closer to her. You're incredible, and I'm sorry if I haven't made it clear how much you mean to me. Her ethereal beauty seemed to intensify in the soft light, silver hair moving gently in the evening breeze as she looked up at me. Show me, she whispered. I cupped her face in my hands, marveling at the delicate perfection of her features and the trust in her eyes. When our lips met, it was with the careful tenderness that characterized everything about Serafina. Measured, meaningful, and infinitely precious. The kiss deepened gradually, years of restrained affection finding expression in the privacy of the moonlit balcony. Serafina's hands came up to rest against my chest, her touch light but unmistakably possessive. When we finally parted, she rested her forehead against mine, her breathing slightly uneven. I know sharing you isn't ideal, she said softly, but I would rather have a part of your heart than live without you entirely. You don't have just a part, I replied, my voice rough with emotion. You have all of me, Serafina, just as Cecilia does and Rose and Rachel and Reka. My heart isn't divided, it's expanded. Her smile at those words was radiant, transforming her from ethereal princess to something warmly, vibrantly human. Then I am content, she said simply, and in that moment, I believed her completely. From inside the suite, we could hear Luna's delighted laughter as she played with her new music box, the sound a perfect counterpoint to the peaceful intimacy of the evening. Tomorrow would bring business meetings and political maneuvering, but tonight was ours. A gift as unexpected and precious as Serafina's presence itself. Chapter 700. Southern Continent. 3. The royal palace of Valdris rose from the mountainside like something carved from dragon's dreams. Massive spires of obsidian and gold that seemed to grow naturally from the cliff face, their surfaces adorned with intricate carvings that told the history of the southern continent's beast bloodline dynasties. As our convoy of luxury vehicles wound up the mountain road, Luna pressed her face against the window in wide-eyed amazement. Daddy, is that really where dragons live? She whispered, her breath fogging the glass. Some of them, I confirmed, watching the palace grow larger as we approached. The Vizirian family has maintained alliance with radiant dragon Tiamat for over 1,000 years. Serafina sat beside me with her characteristic poise, though I caught the slight tension in her posture that indicated she was as alert as I was to the political significance of this meeting. Reka, positioned across from us, had that particular stillness that meant she was cataloging potential threats and escape routes. The palace gates were flanked by massive statues of dragons in flight, their eyes set with gems that seemed to track our movement as we passed. Guards in ceremonial armor lined the approach, each one bearing the distinctive golden scales that marked them as members of the Royal Dragon Guard. We were escorted through halls adorned with tapestries depicting ancient alliances between dragons and the beast bloodline families, the artwork emphasizing partnership rather than dominance. The air itself felt different, charged with the kind of primal power that came from centuries of draconic presence. Prince Ian Vizirian waited for us in the throne room of scales, though he stood before the massive dragonbone throne rather than sitting upon it. At 19, he had grown into the promise of his royal bloodline, tall and broad-shouldered, with flame-red hair that seemed to move with its own inner fire and golden eyes that held ancient wisdom beyond his years. Arthur. Serafina. His greeting was warm and genuine, the formal protocols giving way to the familiarity of academy friendships. I heard you graduated early to focus on guild operations, Arthur. How does it feel to be free of Professor Aldwin's economics lectures? Like escaping a particularly verbose prison, I replied, clasping his offered hand. Though I do miss some aspects of academy life. How are you managing to balance studies with royal duties? Barely, he admitted with a grin that revealed slightly elongated canines, a mark of his draconic bloodline. Father insists I finish my education properly, but situations like this require the heir to step up. Ouroboros has been making quite the impression across the continents. Serafina offered a graceful curtsy. Your Highness, Mount Hua sends its regards and hopes for continued prosperity. Always the diplomat, even during academy breaks, Ian laughed. Though I notice you didn't come alone this time, Arthur. His golden eyes had found Luna, who was standing slightly behind me and staring up at him with the fascinated expression of a child meeting her first real prince. The butterfly pendant Serafina had given her caught the light from the room's crystal chandeliers. This is Luna, I said, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. My daughter. Ian's eyes widened before his expression shifted to one of delighted surprise. Well, that's a development the Academy Gossip Network definitely missed. Hello, Princess Luna. Luna giggled at the title. I'm not a princess, Your Highness. I'm just Luna. Nonsense, Ian said with mock seriousness, crouching down to her level. Anyone brave enough to visit a dragon princess palace is definitely princess material. Plus, your father's practically royalty himself these days. The ice broken, we moved to a more comfortable meeting room where the serious discussions could begin. Luna was escorted to an adjoining playroom by palace staff who specialized in entertaining young guests, while Reika positioned herself where she could observe both rooms. Father sends his regrets that he couldn't meet with you personally. Ian began as servants brought refreshments. The council is in session, dealing with territorial disputes in the southern provinces against the Abyssal Kin. But he's authorized me to negotiate on behalf of the southern continent's beast bloodline families. I appreciate the trust, I replied, especially considering you're juggling this with your academy responsibilities. Actually, this counts as my practical politics final project, Ian said with a wry smile. The next several hours were spent in detailed discussions about Aetheryte applications, market access, and the political implications of the technology. Ian proved to be every bit as sharp as I'd expected. He grasped the revolutionary potential of Aetheryte immediately, while also demonstrating a mature understanding of continental power dynamics that belied his 19 years. The healing applications alone would transform our aerial combat capabilities, he said, reviewing Priscilla's technical specifications. Our Rider bloodline families operate in environments where conventional medical support is impossible. Exactly, I confirmed. Aetheryte-enhanced healing potions can function in extreme temperatures, high altitudes, even in the presence of hostile magical fields. Serafina added her own observations about supply chain logistics and defensive applications, her analytical mind complementing the strategic discussion perfectly. It was clear that despite our youth, we were all taking these negotiations with the seriousness they deserved. As the afternoon wore on, we covered everything from mining rights to exclusive distribution agreements. Ian was particularly interested in Aetheryte's potential for enhancing draconic magic, though he was careful not to reveal too many details about the southern continent's most closely guarded bloodline secrets. I think we can reach an accord, Ian said finally as the sun began to set beyond the palace windows. But I'll need to consult with the council and send a full report to Father before finalizing terms. Shall we reconvene tomorrow morning? Of course, I agreed. These agreements are too important to rush, especially with your academic deadlines to consider. Don't remind me, Ian groaned. I still have to write a 10-page essay for homework. We returned to our guest quarters in the palace's west wing, luxurious apartments that had been designed to accommodate visiting dignitaries. Luna was exhausted from her day of exploration and fell asleep almost immediately after dinner, curled up in a bed that was probably worth more than most people's houses. I stood on the balcony of our suite, looking out over the mountain valleys where distant dragons could occasionally be seen silhouetted against the stars. The negotiations had gone well, but something felt off. There was an undercurrent of tension in the palace that I couldn't quite identify. Arthur Nightingale. The voice in my mind was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Ancient beyond measure, carrying the weight of eons and the authority of cosmic forces. It wasn't Luna's familiar presence, nor of Erebus or Valeria or any other form of magical communication I recognized. He who breaks fate. You have come all the way to me. I froze, every instinct screaming danger even as I couldn't identify the source of the voice. You have come far from the path that was written for you, but greater challenges await. The threads of fate you have severed are beginning to snap back, and the consequences. The voice was cut off by a sound that made the very mountains tremble, a roar that contained the fury of ancient storms and the power of geological forces. The night sky was suddenly filled with an impossible sight, a dragon of such immense size that it blotted out the stars, its scales gleaming like polished obsidian in the moonlight. From inside the palace came shouts of alarm and the sound of running feet. Guards bellowed orders while magical alarms began to wail with urgent intensity. But I knew this wasn't an attack. This was Tiamat, the radiant dragon, eldest and strongest of the draconic species, and the southern continent's most powerful ally, a being so legendary that most people considered her a myth. And she was descending directly toward the palace with the kind of urgent purpose that suggested something had gone catastrophically wrong. Life can never be easy for me now, can it?